Hello, friends, and welcome back to a bonus episode of the Jank Tank. My name is Timothy Zaccanino. I will be hosting for you today, and I've got two wonderful windmill slams on the line with me. Teld and Daneelius are here to talk some Final Fantasy. Guys, I don't know why I actually call these bonus episodes anymore. They're just full-length episodes. They're usually longer than the mainline reviews. Like, this is just a real episode, but I guess I call them bonus episodes because I don't go into too much of the housekeeping stuff. But how are you two doing?
I was gonna say it's because Chris isn't here, but yeah.
Yeah, well, Chris is mainline. Chris is the goat, as it were. So if he's not here, I guess
Daneelius is full time here, though, huh?
That's right, full time, part time.
Daneelius he's on payroll. I'm sorry, I gotta send you out your check for last month. I haven't done that yet.
I'm waiting.
Mop will send it by Moogle in 3 to 6 business days.
Nice. Final Fantasy references. All right, let's get them in there. So I guess the first question I have to ask, and I already know the answer, but the listeners don't know the answer, is what is your relationship to Final Fantasy?
Yeah, I have never played a moment of Final Fantasy in my life, and I have no idea about any of this. None of it at all. Don't care. It's fine. They're magic cards with different skins. I don't care.
Do you know what a chocobo is and like a Moogle, or do you just straight
I know
up,
nothing. Nope. Nothing at all.
Oh,
Zero.
Okay.
Okay, so today will be an episode. So I've played every single mainline Final Fantasy except for 11, and then 15, 16. I haven't played the new ones. But 1 through 14, I have played the MMO. I'm only in Stormblood, and I kind of am on and off again with that one. So, still slowly trudging through the 500 hours of plot whenever I feel like it. But I'm a huge fan of the games. Like, Final Fantasy 9 was one of my core gaming memories way back when I was 10 years old. Final Fantasy 10 is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Love 4, 5, and 6. The SNES era Final Fantasy is absolutely incredible. Yeah, so big fan of the series. I've been a big fan for a very long time, and I'm sure I'll eventually get around to finishing 14 and playing 15, 16.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I knew you were a big fan of the franchise. I'm like in between. I used to call myself like a Final Fantasy fan, but I dropped off after 12. Like, I just didn't like 13. I've never played the MMOs, and 15 I think is just a garbage game. I'm sorry to there's going to be some opinions going all over the place when it comes to this Universes Beyond stuff, but I think 15 is terrible. And I've played 1 and 2 at some point in my life. I don't really remember them that much, but I didn't really play like the SNES versions and 3 through 6 or whatever. So I'm like that golden age PS1, PS2 boy who knows like 7, 8, 9, 10, and I quite like 12 when it came out as well. I couldn't tell you very much about it. So like I get most of the references here because most of the references in the set are geared towards 7, 8, 9, 10. And there's a lot of 14 in here. I don't know jack about 14, but there's a lot of 14 in this set, just given how much content there is. So like you'll have to be my resident FF14, like what is going on here kind of person. But
well, it turns out 14, there's actually in this set a couple of major spoilers. Not really at the peasant level, I don't think, but turns out there's some massive spoilers to stuff I apparently haven't even got to yet, but one of them I did recognize, and it did spoil me for 14 to something I haven't reached in the game yet, but I know the character.
I never thought about Universes Beyond as a mechanism for spoilers.
Just to be clear too, as we're talking about these, we're going to talk about some of the flavor every once in a while if like it's particularly good. So this is your warning that if you have any intent of playing a Final Fantasy game, probably some major spoilers in advance. And also, Tim, I never played the original SNES version of 4, 5, and 6. I played them on the GBA remake, and I highly recommend them because they cleaned up all of the bad. The graphics are tuned up and they look perfect, and like they cleaned up some of the gameplay. So it's really great.
That's how I've played 1 and 2. So I never owned an SNES. Like, come on. All right, so we're gonna skip through our single card discussion, our housekeeping type stuff, since this is a bonus episode. We will have more in-depth thoughts about the mechanics up front in the mainline episode, which we're recording that tomorrow, but it should be out before this episode. So if you're listening like sequentially, I recommend going and checking that out. I think it'll be episode number 47. We'll talk about the mechanics. We'll talk about the setting and, a little bit more in depth. We'll get Chris's thoughts on Final Fantasy. I know that he's, in depth with pretty much the same era of Final Fantasy as I am. We will talk about mechanics when we get to them here, because there are some interesting ones. I know, Daneelius, you've got some thoughts on some of the kind of like larger mechanics, and we've got question marks about the summons and stuff like that. But we'll wait till we actually get to the cards where they're relevant to actually start discussing them. with that all being said, I guess I should first off remind people that we're doing the grading scale, right? We're using an A through F grading scale, basically the limited resources style grading scale, but we have tweaked it for cube purposes. So, I won't go grade by grade by grade here, but, an A is going to be your slam dunk first pick cards that, pull you into, I guess your Bs are the cards that pull you into the colors. The As are kind of like the top tier stuff, and then it goes down the line from there. We're not going to mention our grades for every single card here, but we have individually graded them as kind of a talking point amongst ourselves. And then I do want to remind people that Daneelius will be coming from the perspective of their own cube, which is the, Daneelius's Peasant All-Stars cube. I'll have a link to that wherever you're listening to this, whereas Teld and I are really kind of focusing on the Jank Diver Game and Peasant Cube, but we are going to try to like contextualize things for, Peasant Cube as a whole rather than, just our own individual cubes. So there will be some grade differences based on the cubes that we actually like partake in more often. But for the most part, we'll try to make it all come together in the end there. So
so for those who aren't familiar with it, we mentioned this from time to time, but just in general, there's a lot of overlap in our cubes, but Daneelius's tends to be a little more on curve and proactive, whereas ours, we tend to favor slightly clunkier, more synergistic cards, just a little like a hair. But I would say that overall, there should be a lot of overlap on these cards.
Yeah, ours is like McDonald's. Daneelius is like Burger King. No big deal. I'll let you take from that what you will. I suppose I'll kick us off with white here, just to kind of like get into the flow of things. We've made a pinky promise before recording that we're gonna keep things as succinct as possible. There are gonna be a lot of cards that we're talking about just because they do something unique or they're flavorful. We're not gonna spend too much time on those, but when it comes to the actual like strategic cards, we'll go ahead and get into them. So unless you guys have any other things you want to wax poetic about with Final Fantasy, I guess we should actually talk about some Final Fantasy cards. And maybe we can surprise Daneelius and be like, oh, well, this ability is here because of this character.
Oh, we're doing it with card number 1.
We are.
All right, last spoiler warning, because we're about to spoil a 30-year-old game.
Okay, so let's get into these cards here. Let's talk Magic. Let's talk Final Fantasy. So first card of the review here, Zack Fair. This is a white mana for a 0/1 legendary human soldier, uncommon. It enters with a +1/+1 counter on it, so effectively a 1 mana 1/2. For a single mana, you can sacrifice Zack Fair. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Put Zack Fair's counters on that creature and attach an equipment that was attached to Zack Fair
so good.
to that creature. So obviously they're like Zack being the person who gave the Buster Sword to Cloud, right? Or Cloud kind of just took it, but
so yeah, Zack was the the sort of persona that Cloud has in the games, being like the Giga Chad. That was Zack. Cloud was actually just some random recruit, and Zack I think dies protecting him, and then Cloud just basically takes up his identity in his Buster Sword. So that's why it both protects the target and then puts its stuff on it, because it's Cloud subsuming that identity.
Yeah, very, very cool. And you can see the Buster Sword in the art, obviously. So how about the card, though? So this is one of those 1 mana protection style creatures. We've seen these quite a bit. Alciad of Life's Bounty, and what is it? The dog, the
Selfless
1
Savior.
mana. Yes, Selfless Savior is the one that comes to mind here. Are you putting any stock in the actual moving of equipment here, or is it just the counter? And do you think you need to be doing other stuff with this card, or is it good enough as like a standalone thing with no other like equipment or +1/+1 counter synergies going on?
I think it's doing a little bit more. I think that the counter is very relevant, and it's unique for this style of effect. Like, another card you didn't mention is Siren Storm Tamer is another like 1-drop that can sacrifice 4 mana, and that is the big difference between this and say the Selfless Savior or Dauntless Bodyguard, is that this does cost a mana to activate, which makes it more like the Storm Tamer or Alciad of Life's Bounty. But the fact that it puts a counter is a big deal. Protection spells that leave some amount of value behind, in my opinion, are just a lot more valuable than protection spells that don't. And the fact that this is a protection spell that leaves value behind while also just being a thing you get to play on turn 1, and the 1/2 body I think is relevant. I mean, we've talked about this a lot over the last few set reviews, but I just keep going down and down and down on one toughness creatures in general, and this doesn't have that problem. So before any potential like +1/+1 counter synergies, I think this is a really solid card. I mean, I would give it a C in the sense that I would play it, I think, in basically any proactive white strategy. I don't think I'm playing it probably in very many of the more mid-rangey, pixie style decks, but any assertive strategy in general, I think I'm going to be very happy to play this. A card I actually compared this to in the document is Revitalizing Repast, in the sense that it's a 1-mana trick that gives your thing indestructible and puts a counter on. And yeah, the Repast is a trick. It's a surprise, theoretically, but the trade-off here is that this gets to be a creature in play. So I think this card is really solid, and I'm going to be happy to run it in most of my assertive white decks.
The counters thing will come up from time to time, but getting more counters on Zach to move around could potentially come up. There's a few cards that do that, stuff like Ridgescale Tusker. And there's a non-zero number of equipment, and they seem pretty committed to this sort of living weapon style equipment that keeps sneaking their way into cubes. So I could see this being like the kind of card that also potentially opens up some blowouts where, you can attack and then like proactively sack this card to move stuff onto like a trampler or something like that if your opponent doesn't, make blocks difficult for your opponent. And I think this is a card that's going to scale into this new age of Magic where we're throwing around +1 counters and equipment very aggressively.
Yeah, if you lean into either of these things, +1 counters or equipment, the card probably like goes autoplay status. But for our purposes, I could see this totally taking the spot of like a Savannah Lines, like a cheeky House Mouse or something, because it just has a little bit more utility beyond what those cards offer. So I like it. I don't know that it's definitely not like a slam dunk if you're not leaning into any of the actual like advertised themes here. Probably really, really good in like the retail limited format because of all the equipment floating around. But I like it, and it's telling a nice little story there. So cool little text box. I agree. It does feel uniquely different than this sort of effect usually is. Whereas the next card maybe doesn't. Actually, Teld has to read these cards. It's in the contract.
Yeah, which we're in for a bad time when I'm not even excited about this card. It's Ambrosia Whiteheart. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature bird. Oh, it's a legendary creature. That's cool. It has flash, and when it enters, you may return another permanent you control to its owner's hand. It has landfall, gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is a Chocobo. And it is, of course, Skyfisher, or Rescuer Chinga maybe would be more accurate. It's Rescuer Chinga, but it's legendary and has landfall. There you go. That's
the card. Yeah, I mean, this is on this has to be on their little blueprint document, right? Because we were very excited about Sun Pearl Kieran in the last episode, and it's just like we saw this immediately after, and it's like, okay, they're just gonna keep doing this, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
Like how many Skyfishers is too many? And once Teld is telling you that too many Skyfishers is too many Skyfishers, like.
We've definitely jumped the shark, and Core Skyfisher's kind of become a bit of it's on its villain arc now, where it used to be like the cool hipstery thing where you'd pick up your cards but were clunky or had downside or whatever, and you could generate value off of quote unquote downside of these cards. And now it's just like the best thing to be doing is making game objects with your super efficient permanents. And so these are just picking up those super efficient permanents and accidentally creating loops and all that sort of stuff. So player sentiment's definitely shifting on these cards. I'm still a fan, but even I'm getting a little exhausted by this being in every single set.
For the longest time, Black-Red was the boogeyman of my format. And now White-Black has kind of joined Black-Red as a boogeyman of the format because of black kind of being, I think, the best color to pair with these pixie effects or the Skyfisher effects, because like nowhere to run or other permanent removal spells. It just turns these decks into like oops all CubeCobras is what I call them, because just like every single card you play is a creature that kills a creature. A couple things though I do think are worth noting on this card. One is it's legendary, and actually going back to the last creature is also legendary. There's a metric ton of peasant legendaries in the set. 41 is what I just
197 legends in the entire set, I believe.
Yeah,
just
but 41 peasant legendaries is kind of insane. And the thing to think about, there's some things to note there. For instance, going back to Lord of the Rings, that set had a lot of legendaries as well, and one of the signposts from that set was Frodo, the white-green creature that triggers on legendary creatures being played. There's some legendary synergies in this set as well, and so I can imagine a world where you're trying to push legendary as a theme, and then stuff like this becomes a lot more interesting.
This is just going to be every Universes Beyond set, though, right? Yeah. Because they're defined by like highly identifiable guys.
They've confirmed they're trying to cut back on legends in normal, like in universe sets, because they are aware that there will be extreme numbers of legends in Universes Beyond sets.
So it's something to keep in mind if you're like, hey, I that could be a cool theme in my cube is to have like white green legends or whatever. I think we're getting to the point where that is definitely a doable thing. And the other thing is like this is a meaningful upgrade on Twinga. Like the landfall ability is not nothing, and it's enough of an upgrade on Twinga. And I already thought the Twinga was really good. I mean, I graded. I would have had Twinga as a B. I would also have this as a B. One of the better white cards in the cube if I decide to add it. And I do think it's enough of an upgrade that it's worth shifting some things around to get this in because with the MH3 fetch lands, like getting to attack with this as a 4/2 or whatever is that's not a small thing. So I think this card is excellent. Maybe one of the top 2 or 3 cards in the set. But I agree with you. It's hard to get that excited about this template because we just get it all the time now.
Yeah, honestly, I think 2-mana 2/2 flash with the landfall ability would be like something to consider. I don't think that would be good enough, but I don't think the landfall ability, and all the birds in this set have that landfall ability. It's going to come up again on some other cards, but I don't think that's nothing text, right? It's like, oh, that's a cool bonus. It's like, no, this actually attacks as like a 3/2 pretty regularly.
One other thing about this card that I noticed that a lot of the more recent ones didn't have is this can pick up your lands, and so you can pick up your MDFC lands to actually get the spell side of them later into the game. I guess it makes sense. It synergizes with the landfall ability, so that makes perfect sense why it does that. But I've just gotten kind of used to a lot of the newer ones having non-land permanent.
Yeah, Sun Pearl Kirin does not. I think the last one we got that does was actually the Frog from Boomburrow. Speaking of just jamming these things down our throat. But I didn't mention it yet, but we do have a bonus sheet with Final Fantasy here. It's called Through the Ages, and the idea behind the bonus sheet is that it's 64 reprints, and instead of commissioning new art, they used concept art that already existed for all of the Final Fantasy games and just slapped it on, which I think makes individually very ugly Magic the Gathering cards. Like, I think the art is very bad. Art is nice as a standalone thing. Like, the concept art's very cool, but the Magic card that actually is produced by that art is like horrendously bad with this nasty like bold text. So I think these cards look atrocious. Personally, they're going to be huge eyesores when you open them in a play booster or whatever. I believe they're in a 1-to-3 ratio, so every 3 play boosters is going to have one. But we're going to talk about them here. They're all reprints. We're only going to talk about the ones that are new to Arena specifically, and also uncommon for the first time, so there's some downshifts. But that's all to say, Wall of Omens is the next card here. This is a reprint. 1 and a white for 0/4 Defender. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So Wall of Blossoms, if you're familiar with that card, which has been on the Arena client, this is like the original white version of that card. And I think we've largely like surpassed Wall of Omens at this point. We kind of get like the cantrip white creature as a proactive thing now with Split Skin Doll, or even Spirited Companion. If you want to just play like cantrip creatures in white, you have to kind of want to have a white controlling deck in your queue before Wall of Omens is something you're really interested in. So maybe this gets a bump up in our mainline cube episode when we talk about it there. But for the purposes of Peasant Cube, like the 0 power blocker type thing just gets run over, I found. So I'm not super into it, but I also think like resolving a Wall of Omens is not the worst thing in the world. So if you want a white controlling style deck somehow, or a Flyers deck maybe even could take advantage of it, then this is an option for the card pool.
Yeah, I think in lieu of synergies, I would place this as like better than Spirited Companion, but definitely worse than Split Skin Doll or Builder's Talent, which is the other card you have listed here as a comp. Just in terms of, I think at Peasant, this effect is definitely worse because I think white doesn't pair with like the traditional blue control deck as often. It's more of like a third color, or more commonly paired with black. If you're trying to do like the grindy thing. So I think this card is, if it shows up in a cube, it's probably acceptable, but I don't think I'm ever going to be excited to pick this in the context of a cube. And I've got to have a very specific deck before I'd even be interested in this.
Yeah, almost even more than the cantrip creatures. I think it's Builder's Talent that pushes this card out of cube these days. But not everybody's on Builder's Talent because they're not doing the non-creature permanent stuff. And if you are still doing Soul Herder stuff, then having access to more 2-drop cantrip creatures makes some amount of sense. So I agree with the sentiment of, if I saw this in a cube these days, it's not like I'd be shocked. I just think that there are better options.
Yeah. Builder's Talent's actually a great example because that's a 0/4 that draws you Builder's Talent and puts it on the battlefield, and then also does other stuff. So, and Builder's Talent, man, do I love Builder's Talent. It also just incidentally works a lot these days. So like, I would really recommend trying out Builder's Talent. You don't even have to warp much of a section around it, given the way things are in Peasant Cube. Maybe even Birth of Meletus is like better than Wall of Omens, right? It only ever draws you the planes, but it gains you some life too. So yeah, so not excited. Are you guys into like the bonus sheet here? Or like,
I have a bone to pick with a card coming up. That's I think kind of egregious that what they decided to do.
Okay.
But
there's a couple of them that I kind of like, but I would say the vast majority of them are pretty rough to look at. I also just didn't like that the bonus sheet is mostly cards that are already on Arena and bad. It's like,
well, because it's. I'll save my rant for the mainline episode. I hate this bonus sheet. I think it's one of the worst they've ever done. But
that being said, I love bonus sheets so much. So give us more bonus sheets. They make the retail environment so much better.
Bonus sheet, but yeah, this is one of the weaker ones for sure.
Yeah. All right, I'll save that rant for the mainline episode. Teld, what do we have next? This is a card that you kind of shouted out, and I kind of like it.
Yeah, this is Delivery Moogle. So it's 3 and a white for a 3/2 flying Moogle creature. And when it enters, you can search your library and or graveyard for an artifact with mana value 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So I really like this card. It's kind of got like Micromancer, Trinket Mage energy. But the fact that this card can tutor something out of your deck or pick it up out of the graveyard means that you only ever have to have like one hit for this to work, which I think gives it a level of playability that this sort of effect often doesn't. Because like the problem with a Trinket Mage or a Tribute Mage type effect is they're very narrow in that they only search one mana value and they only search your deck. So you have to have a number of targets at a very specific mana value. And this just gets around all of that, and also can go get the best card in Cube, which of course is Mishra's Bauble, and then it can buy your Mishra's Bauble back from the graveyard so that you can synergize with your Clarion Spirit on the turn you play it. You know, this is basically Mishra's Bauble's new best friend.
Snap and Drake stat line is terrible, but if you make it a 2-for-1, it's like acceptable. And I love me a Micromancer, and that's what kind of sold me on it a little bit. It's you said like Micromancer for artifacts. I'm like, okay, yeah, I could totally buy that. Even goes up to mana value too, even though the body is like inconsequential most games.
Yeah, I don't love Micromancer. I do play it, but one of the downsides of Micromancer in my mind is that it is kind of difficult sometimes to get a good spread of effects on your 1-mana spells for Micromancer to go find. Like you can usually get like a cantrip, and then you're really trying to get a removal spell if you can, and then maybe you get like a spree card. The fact that this has this spread of 0 to 2 mana artifacts opens up just a huge amount of possibilities, and some of the ones I wrote down just in white would be Portable Hole. This is for my cube. Portable Hole, Duskrose Reliquary as kind of removal spells, Job Select, and for Mirrodin equipment like Mandibular Kite. It can get Splitskin Doll. It can get Clay-Fired Bricks, Spring-Loaded Saw Blades. There's a ton of things just in white in my cube that this can get, and so it's not going to be that difficult in my mind to get a good spread of effects. All that being said, I'm just not that excited about kind of expensive card advantage creatures. I think we ultimately have infinite options for that effect if we really want it. What makes this probably a play for me is just that it does seem interesting to draft with, kind of similarly to Micromancer. It gives you this little like quest in the draft of like, okay, how do I make sure I optimize this card? So I think it's probably going to be fun. I doubt it's going to be like incredibly strong, but it's probably fun enough at least to try for a season or two.
Yeah, a couple of other cards that, I wanted to throw out there that you didn't mention that aren't necessarily in white. It can go get artifact lands, which is pretty cool. Right, it can kind of serve as your land drop. I don't know how many more land drops you're going to want to make it for mana, but if you need it, it can do that. Can kind of circumvent that also by getting a Clay-Fired Bricks. Other things it can do, though, it can get an Osseous Stick Twister. It can get a Scrapwork Mutt, which is pretty cool, right? Because just card sets up a lot of stuff really well. And then really importantly, it can get Dune Drifter, which is probably more important than Arabella, but it can also get that card. So a couple of really powerful cards it can get. Now, I'd say Dune Drifter is probably the best of them just because that's such a good value card. And if you're up to 4 or 5 mana, you're probably starting to look towards the I need to start finding a way to push ahead in the game, whether that's generating damage or value. And I assume if you're playing Delivery Moogle, you're more on the value side, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah. Also worth noting that the Jank Diver Gaming Cube has a deliberate artifact theme in blue-white right now. So obviously you would hope that this were an artifact itself, but being able to fetch up an artifact in those styles of decks is very useful. I did want to ask a question. So Oltec Cloud Guard, that's a 3 and a white for a 3/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 artifact gnome. How often on average do you think Delivery Moogle would be better than that card? And that card, I'm bringing it up because that card's not anything special, but how often do you think fetching the artifact is going to be better than just getting the 1/1 artifact in play immediately?
Basically always in our cube. And in Daneelius' cube, I could be sold that Oltec Cloud Guards might be better just because of the way that cube plays out. But in our cube, I have to assume Delivery Moogle's better 80% of the time, maybe more.
That's why for me, that's why I'm not necessarily that high on the strength of this card. It's more about the what it does to the draft, and it's a cool card to draft with to me more than it is like a particularly powerful card. But it's not a bad card. It's just like I said, there's just so many options for 4 mana. Creature that draws card or creature that makes object, and this is just another option, but I think it's more fun than a lot of the other options.
Yeah, it's not creature that draws a card though. It's Demonic Tutor with a 3/2 flyer staple
That's right.
to it.
That's right.
Demonic Tutor and Reanimate. Also, apparently this is a FF14 Moogle. I wouldn't have known that without the little thing in the bottom left corner that tells you what game these things are from.
Wait, what? Oh, it sure does, huh?
Yeah. Every single card has a title attached to it to tell you what game the thing is
cool.
from.
Nice touch.
Daneelius, did you want to talk about this next one?
Yeah, this is a Summon Choco Mog, I assume. It's 2 and a white for a 3/3 enchantment creature saga bird Moogle. Those are words that are now in Magic cards. That's cool. So this is a 4-chapter summon, and there's these cycle of summons now in the set of where they're creatures that are also sagas, and so they go away. They go away after some number of turns. The chapters on this are all the same, so 1 through 4 all say other creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. And I think I mentioned it's a 3/3. So the summons are fascinating. I honestly am having a difficult time trying to evaluate them for retail, much less for Cube. The difference between there's some that are 4 chapters and some that have 3 chapters, and the main difference is the 4-chapter summons get to attack twice and block 3 times, and the 3-chapter summons get to attack once and block twice before they go away. What is really interesting to me about Summon Chocomog is that we don't really have a great comp for this at Peasant, like kind of period. The closest one I could come up with as like a 3-drop creature that anthemed your team is Beckoning Will-O-Wisp, which I don't think is a card that's available on Arena, but it's a flying 3, I think it's 3 mana 1/3 flyer that when it attacks, it anthems your team in a similar way. I think this is, without the saga text, this is definitely better because it's just an ETB. You just get it every turn. So, if this was not a saga, this card would be nuts to me. Like if just you get a 3 mana 3/3 that every turn anthems your team, I think that would be very, very strong. So what's the downside of it being a saga? Well, it does make you maybe play a little bit differently because, maybe you're looking to hold this until like turn 4 or turn 5 after you've already played your hop to it, or maybe, after you played your, make 4 bird token card or whatever. You might want to not always just run this out there immediately, because the downside of running a card like this out there immediately is that it allows your opponent to spend all the removal on your non-sagas, and then this just eventually evaporates, and it's kind of like you've spotted your opponent an extra removal spell. So the play patterns on these cards are weird. That being said, the effect on this card in my mind is really strong. Now, how often are you going to want to play this card outside of a go wide white deck? Probably never. And so with all this being said, I do like the card, but it's probably pretty narrow. And so I give it like a C- in the sense that I'm not playing this in every deck. I'm not even necessarily playing this in every assertive white deck. I do really want to be going wide, but if I'm going wide, I think this card's going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I like this card, but I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Like this, especially compared to some of the other summons that they're all hard to grok because we haven't had this effect before, and we're not. This is kind of reminds me of like the inverse of like the Neo Sagas, where with the Neo Sagas you got drip fed a bunch of value and then you get a big creature, and whereas here you're getting like a creature and then drip feeding some value, but all your cards going to go away. This card in particular, you need to leverage the plus here because it doesn't generate value, right? It just generates board pressure, and it doesn't generate toughness, so it doesn't necessarily open up attacks per se, except for converting those attacks into damage. So yeah, you do need to be assertive, and this is probably closer to like I'm going to compare it to Blood Artist in the sense that you rarely ever play Blood Artist early into the game. You usually play it like the last turn or 2 of the game. And I think this is kind of the same way. You're going to try to play this at the very end of the game, and then you're going to like attack with it a time or 2 if you need to, and your opponent's going to die because your board was so big and you pumped your board so much, which definitely narrows it down in our cube to like the Naya spectrum probably of cards.
Yeah, summons are a big question mark right now. I think this card on rate is good. Obviously, like you said, if it wasn't a saga and it just had this ability at the beginning of combat, it'd be very good. So the question is like, how good is it if you only get it for 3 turns or only get to attack with it twice or whatever? And I'm assuming with pretty much all the sagas, like you're just kind of happy at any point to trade them off for a removal spell or another creature because you were going to lose them anyway. But then there's also the skill testing question of being on the opposite side of it, and it's like, ah, man, like I'm going to lose a lot of life, but they're going to lose this creature eventually. Like, I have this removal spell. Am I supposed to use it? Am I supposed to not use it? And like, obviously, like, you know, more skilled players will kind of like suss out the right thing to do given the situation. So yeah, big question mark on summons. Like, I'm not confident with any of the summons that we're going to talk about today, because they could end up being really, you know, poor in the broad scheme of things, especially in very, very grindy matches. But the power level output on this card is definitely there. So we're gonna almost certainly try it and see how it does.
One other note is that because this does have this ETB trigger, and because you are incentivized, like, so if you do get into this, you know, kind of stare down contest with your opponent, where your opponent is leveraging the fact that it's going to go away on its own, you do get to do kind of cool things where you blink this, or you pixie this back to your hand and replay it, and that gives you 2 triggers on the same turn while also then resetting the counters. Or you could like cast a not dead after all style effect on this. On the turn it's going to go away, which means it comes back and again triggers the +1/+0 again, so you're using +2/+0. So there's a lot of play to this card that is exciting, depending on your environment, and you know, depending on the amount of tricks and the amount of ways you have to reset this. If you're playing Nesting Grounds, for instance, I think all these sagas get better. So I think these are fascinating cards, and I really have no idea. I mean, they could be awful. You know, the comparison to the Neo sagas, I think, is a good one, because almost all the Neo sagas end up playing way better than you think, because they just, at the end, you just get this creature, and this is the opposite. So I can see these all playing worse than you think, because you know they operate the opposite way. But I think they have promise.
They're all enchantments too, so they're vulnerable to enchantment removal, but give you like enchantment upsides if you're doing that thing. A couple just very niche things that I think are worth mentioning is if you have proliferate going on in your cube, you can kill your opponent's summons a lot quicker. Like, you can just force them up a chapter, and they might just die at an inopportune time. And then a rules change that they actually made in the kind of like overarching rules thing for this set. It used to be that if a saga had no abilities, it would just die. Like, just as a state-based action, it would die due to, you know, rules tweaks and stuff like that. They actually made a change to that in this set for these the purposes of summons, where if a summon loses its abilities, it just exists as a vanilla creature on board, and it won't gain any more chapter abilities. It won't just die like it would have if they didn't have them in that rules tweak. So, you know, I was going into this thinking that, like, if you slapped unable to scream on a summon, it would just die right away, but they actually tweaked the rules so that that's not the case. So just keep that in mind if you don't read those sort of bulletins or anything like that. Moving on, kind of a quick one to talk about here. Auron's Inspiration. 2 and a white for an instant. Attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn, and it has flashback for 2 white. So kind of a rally the peasants here. We all graded it D+, which is the, you know, telltale sign that we probably shouldn't even be really talking about it that much, but it is the type of card that if you've played with Rally the Peasants, it can push a lot of damage. And we do, I think we have room for like one of these in our cube. We waffle back and forth. It was on the job for a very long time. We switched it to Rally the Peasants recently. You know, I don't think Auron's Inspiration gets over the hump for either of those, but it is it has some pretty strong damage output in a single color, whereas Rally the Peasants required you to have red for the flashback.
When you said we swapped it for Rally the Peasants, did you mean Rally the Monastery?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Rally the Monastery is the card that we're currently playing in this kind of space. Rally the Peasants is the card that Auron's Inspiration is clearly, designed to kind of mimic.
Yeah, I think this card is fine. The more your white section is about going wide, the more you have room for multiples of these styles of effects. I just think there are better options these days. I think Requisition Raid is kind of the best in class at this point. I think Duty Beyond Death, which we got in TDM, is very strong, as is Rally the Monastery. So, and then we're not even talking about the creature versions of this effect like Neighborhood Guardian or Rosie. So I just think we get better options these days. But if your white section is a lot about going wide, and you can play 2, 3, 4 versions of this effect, then this is a fine include.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked this card a lot when I first read it, because just kind of was like, oh, that's cool. And then the more I thought about it, it's like, on the job is good because of the toughness means that you can kind of just turn all your dudes sideways, and like, even if it doesn't work out perfect, you've cycled and went up a clue. I think this one's a lot more committal. So I was originally like, oh, this card's cool. It's like Rally the Peasants, but we can do it all in white. But the more I thought about it, I don't really think this card's very good. And I think even in terms of like AoE board pump style effects, there's just multiple better options available.
For sure. So not anything we have to go like super in depth on there. The next one might be very similar though. This is one of those like lore ones I want to talk about a little bit. So you're not alone. You are not alone for a single white mana. It's an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you control 3 or more creatures, it gets +4/+4 until end of turn. And I guess just like on rate, how do you feel about this as a combat trick? I think we're still on a crumb and get it, which, cringe, but this one I think probably compares unfavorably to that. But 1 mana for +4/+4 if you can manage it is pretty strong. Not that we haven't had cards like that before, like Might of the Masses can do that in green. I think there's even a strictly better Might of the Masses in MKM that people forget about, gives like reach or something like that. It's a Get a Leg Up, I think is the name of the card. What do you think of this as a combat trick? Is it passable or is it just like below the bar?
I think this is just worse because it doesn't give indestructible. I think we're just at the point in Magic personally where I'm not real interested in just stats, even if just stats is like better giant growth most of the time.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think it's worth noting. I do think this card is like very unique. White does not. I'm very unique. Nice. White doesn't get this effect. Period. The tricks that you mentioned max out at +2/+2. And yes, we do have Might of the Masses. We have green versions of this effect. We just never seen it in white before. Now, the other thing to note is that this is the best version of this effect at 2 creatures, and it's the best version of at 1 creature. It's the best version of this effect at 3 creatures. If you have 2 creatures in play, or if you have 4 creatures in play, then yes, Might of the Masses style tricks will do the same as this. And if you have more than 4 creatures in play, then those cards get better. That being said, I do think that like 1 creature in play or 3 creatures in play is going to happen quite often, and then this makes this the best version of this effect that we've ever seen. So I'm always intrigued by kind of best in class or best in class adjacent effects. I really like tricks. I think tricks are awesome for Cube, and going into combat and not knowing what your opponent can do, I think is really valuable for the Peasant environment. So I think this card is fine. I think it's totally fine. I might run it for a season. The issue is ultimately it is still just, like you said, a power and toughness boosting trick, and is that good enough to stick around for a long time? Probably not. But I think this is one of, if not the best versions of this effect we've ever seen for white, and it's worth at least consideration. But I probably won't add it this time around, but I'm going to keep it in mind.
Sure. From a flavor perspective, I did want to just go into depth on this one for just a second, because I replayed Final Fantasy IX very recently, like within the last couple months. I'm not as huge on that one as a lot of people are. I think it has too many flaws for me to really like the game, but it is a very good story-driven game. And the moment that's being depicted here, when the main character kind of like has a crisis of self after learning that like his whole life is a lie and blah 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 and stuff like that, usual Final Fantasy stuff. There's this scene that happens. It's the most memorable scene in the game, probably one of the most memorable in the entire like Final Fantasy franchise, where Zidane is like trying to strike out on his own and like become a loner and stuff like that, and like his friends, like through a series of boss battles, like your friends just kind of like help you through the situation. And there's this absolutely baller like musical track called You're Not Alone. You can go look it up on YouTube. It's You're Not Alone by Nobuyo Uematsu. Just one of the most memorable tracks that they've ever put in a Final Fantasy game. Just absolutely excellent. So like the flavor here being like, if your friends are there to help you, like you get a bigger boost. And it's got all the like little boss characters in the back, and Steiner and Quina unfortunately like there as well. So I thought this was a very key card for showing like how much love went into the set, because this is the type of card you wouldn't make unless like you were really entrenched with the games, like naming it after a music track and invoking that key moment from Final Fantasy IX and stuff like that. Like literally when I think of Final Fantasy IX, I think of this moment and the track that goes with it.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the most iconic moments of the game, and it also occurs like 30 hours into the game. And so, you're not just accidentally stumbling on this one in the way that you might stumble on, funny enough, some of the other games, they have iconic moments that occur much earlier into the game, and this is very, very late game. So yeah, great card. Great design, not necessarily a great card. That remains to be seen.
Highly recommend looking up that track too on YouTube. Maybe I'll even link it here. I think I literally paid for it on iTunes. I absolutely love that track.
Final Fantasy just in general, if you play like 4 through 10, just have some of the best soundtracks. Like they're just, all of them have these iconic tracks that are just so great.
Yes, so next up we have Restoration Magic, which is our first instance of the tiered mechanic. They use tiered, I think it only appears on like 7 or 8 cards in the set, but it's kind of their way of showing off limit breaks and also showing off like the tiered magic in Final Fantasy games. So, you know, like there's a level up system where fire becomes Fire-Aw and then becomes Fire-Gaw and then Fire-Jaw and stuff like that. So tiered is a kicker style mechanic that lets you pay different amounts for different styles of effects, or basically pay more expensive kicker costs to add, you know, bigger effects to your card. The kind of quote unquote kicker, no pun intended, being that you only get to pick one kicker cost, as opposed to something like Spree, where you can pay for all of them and add all the effects. You get to choose one effect here. So our first instance of that is Restoration Magic. This is white mana for an instant. It has tiered, and you can pay 0 mana. So they all have a 0 mana mode, which is just saying, like, here's the default. The 0 mana mode says target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You can pay 1 additional mana to have a permanent gain hexproof, indestructible, and gain 3 life. Or you can pay 3 in a white, which would bring the total to 5 mana to give all permanents you control hexproof and indestructible and gain 6 life. So starting off as kind of like the 1 mana save a creature from single target removal or combat or whatever, and then you can bump it up for an extra mana to gain some life, and then you can bump it up for 5 mana to make it like heroic intervention and reset your life total or whatever. Like, pretty, I think, big, significant, you know, upside there. And you'll see this with the tiered spells where the last mode is like extremely expensive, but you have to kind of consider that as the bonus if you have the extra mana laying around, not the default. The default is usually the first or second mode, and then the last one is like not going to come up that often, but if it does, it gives you a pretty big effect. So what do you guys think of Restoration Magic, especially in the context of like other 1 mana spells that are designed to protect a single thing?
I like it. So I'm a big fan of protection spells in Cube. I think that the removal we have access to in Peasant these days is just so strong that if you don't toss in some amount of protection, then some of the black decks can really run away with things. And so I'm a big fan of protection in general. I have protection in basically every color that allows for it. The white version of this effect that I'm currently running is Lauren's Escape, which is 1 mana for a creature or an artifact gets indestructible, I think in hexproof, I can't remember. But it tacks on Scry 1 on the end of that. And I do think that's a really important piece of the puzzle for these protection spells is you need more. You need more to happen. You need to gain some advantage other than just countering the interactive spell that's coming against you or you know, saving your creature in combat. So the advantage that you're getting here comes in 2 ways. One is the modality, which I'm not a big fan of modality having to save the effectiveness of cards these days, because generally speaking, I think you want the most efficient version of the card to be strong enough kind of on its own. But the modality here is interesting. That 5 mana mode is something, you know, being able to alpha strike, especially when you're, you know, using cards like Chocomog, where your creatures have this bonus just naturally going on, or you have a neighborhood guardian effect going on, or whatever. And so you have large creatures just on their own. You get to make a full swing, and then you have this, you know, this full board protective trick in reserve that also can really help swing a race when you're gaining 6 life off that effect. Now, I don't think that's going to come up all that often, though. I do think the thing that makes this a lot more intriguing, though, is the fact that this says target permanent, and it doesn't say artifact or creature. And I think this might be one of the first versions of this effect that can target anything, including your enchantments.
Samuel's
so a couple of very
comes to mind, but that's a green card.
Yep, that's a green one. So a couple of very specific cards in white that this protects. Sheltered by Ghosts. And this is the exact kind of card I'm going to want to put in my Sheltered by Ghost decks. The fact that this protects because that's one of the easiest ways to get around Sheltered, is that they just point their disenchant at the Sheltered, as opposed to having to kill the creature and pay a ward cost. Well, now they go to kill your Sheltered and you just get to protect it. That's huge. It also protects your Builder's Talent potentially, or your Essence Reliquary if you're doing those kinds of decks. Obviously protects your Hunter's Talent in green, or there's a load these days of enchantment kind of build arounds that it's exciting to me to have access to a protection effect for. So, it's a side grade in my mind on Lauren's Escape, but it's an interesting one, and definitely one worth checking out maybe for a season, seeing how it plays.
Yeah, I think it's easy to look at the Cure and Curaga, modes here, the small mode and the big mode, and kind of forget that, like, being able to tack on the extra mana, which you often have laying around to gain 3 life, and protect something is probably solid too, though not enough to play the card. So if this didn't have the Kiriga mode on it, like the big 5 mana mode, I don't think we would talk about it. But, being able to in some situations save an entire board or make a big alpha attack and just gain a bunch of life off of your extra mana seems solid enough to consider this over similar options.
Counter your opponent's Fear Fire foes is a nice move if you happen to have 5 mana laying around, which won't happen very much. But when it does, man, that'll be a story.
Sure. Yeah. Moving into some of the kind of like artifacts, enchantments, so on and so forth. Phoenix Down is in the set. This kind of was a mandatory inclusion. Basically, a Phoenix Down in Final Fantasy is a way to revive a fallen character. So Phoenix Down is a single white mana for an artifact. You can pay 1 and a white, tap it, and exile it to choose one. Return target creature card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, or exile target skeleton, spirit, or zombie. And that's such a great add there. The flavor there being that if you, since Phoenix Down's revived your characters, if you threw them at an undead character, you would kill them. So there you can one-shot a lot of undead characters with a Phoenix Down in Final Fantasy games.
Even a couple of bosses throughout the series that are kind of a pain unless you realize you can Phoenix Down them and then they get one shot and it's really funny.
The card itself, I don't think this is anything special. I did like that they bumped this up to mana value 4 or less, which, the vast majority of these white small ball reanimation spells hit 3 or less or hit like a power threshold. So I do think there are lines where you like Split Skin Doll or Scrapwork Mud away a 4-drop and then reanimate it on turn 3. There's like a non-zero percent number of like spirits and skeletons floating around, and usually you're going to have zombies in pretty much any cube. That text is there for flavor, right? Like if it comes up, it comes up, but like you're not playing it because it can exile a zombie. It is an artifact as well. It does exile itself, unfortunately, so you can't do, or maybe fortunately, so you can't do like really obnoxious loop type stuff with your pixies and things like that. That's something we got in trouble with Surgical Suite. But I think this is a really cool, flavorful design. Probably not good enough because it takes some setup. It takes a decent chunk of mana, especially if you're getting back like a 2-drop or something like that. I think there are comparable cards that are just better with Surgical Suite and most of the recommission style cards like Return Triumphant and actual recommission.
Yeah, I agree. This one doesn't speak to me. I like Surgical Suite a lot, and I think that's significantly better as multiple ways to generate value off that card outside of just 3 animations. So this one's not going to make it for me, but if you're into reanimate in general, and I agree that the 4-drop clause isn't nothing, but it doesn't quite get there for me.
I like that. In speaking of the Split Skin Doll thing, you can like play this on turn 1 and then you can play your doll on turn 4 and like activate this immediately and surprise them, which is pretty cool. That being said, I think the 1 mana artifact is also not nothing, but I do, even though I acknowledge it needed to exile itself, it is kind of the thing that I wish this just sacrificed so that we could do a little more with it.
Well, hear me out. The first hear me out of the episode, your Messenger Moogle gets this, and then this gets back your Messenger Moogle.
Sure does.
Hey.
That's some sick value.
There you go.
It doesn't loop, but it does get your Messenger Moogle back a second time. So
that'll matter in retail, I bet. That'll come.
Yeah, that'll be a straight combo in retail.
Yeah, so flavor forward card here. I thought it was kind of cool with the mana value bump, but let's go ahead and move on. We've got Dragon's Lance. This is going to be the last white card here, and we did actually have a lot of other job select cards on the list originally, but they're kind of all just 2-1. There's so many job select cards that just make 2-1s and then have like bonus text. So the job select mechanic is basically Living Weapon, the difference being that the token you make is a 1/1 colorless hero instead of like a 0/0 germ or a 2/2 rebel from Formyrden. So we've seen this mechanic before. The kind of twist on it is that all of the equipment that has job select also changes the creature type of the thing that it's equipped to, which isn't actually part of the job select mechanic, but is just a flavor thing that they had going on here for the nod to Final Fantasy and, selecting your class or your job or whatever. So for the most part, job select basically just says make a 1/1 hero and then attach this equipment to it when it enters the battlefield. So the kind of like first example we're going to use here is Dragoon's Lance. This is 1 and a white for an uncommon equipment. It has job select. The equipped creature gets +1/+0 and is a knight in addition to its other type. So you're paying 2 mana for a 2/1. And then during your turn, the equipped creature has flying. The equip cost is 4. So you get the first equip for free on the hero token, and then anything beyond that's going to cost a whopping 4 mana. And there are some obvious comparisons here with Barbed Spike, which has a cheaper equip cost by a lot and also gives you flying at all times. And then there's Mandibular Kite, which is the MH3 card, 1 mana 1/1 flyer that also has 4 to equip. I guess I'll ask you guys, where are you at on versus those? Because I think this is less of a how good is this card and more of a how does it compare to the other options card.
Importantly, Barb Spike does not give flying at all times. It makes a flyer. And this is a thing that people get wrong all the time where they go. I've done this, I think in the last draft, I played with Barb Spike, and I played with Barb Spike dozens of times. I went to move my Barb Spike thinking that it was going to give flying to the creature it was moving to. So it does the equipment here giving flying on your turn at least is, an upgrade in a way for sure on Barb Spike, but Barb Spike does give you the better token up front for sure. So I'm not sure, honestly, if it's better or worse than Barb Spike. It's probably a side grade mostly. I think I'm going to try it for a season just to see how it feels because it does feel like a side grade. I just want to note very briefly, I love so much this template of card. I think it's one of the best innovations that Magic has come up with in the last 20 years, especially for Cube. The fact that this is an artifact and a token. It's a non-creature on the stack while being a creature in play. It gives you things to do with your mana. It makes 2 permanents for your grindy decks that are able to leverage, sacrificing multiple permanent types or whatever. I think these cards are so fun to play with in Peasant. That being said, you can't really have a cube that's all... I mean, you could. That would be a fun cube actually to play with. It's like just every single, Vermiridan / job select / living weapon artifact I've ever made. I think that would actually be a lot of fun, but you can't... In most environments, you probably don't want to play all of them, and so it really just does become an issue of which ones are the best. I don't know if this is better than Barb Spike. It's pretty similar to me. So, a good card, I think you can run either or if you would rather run just all of this version, the flying version of this effect, as opposed to things like Ancestral Blade or Citizen's Crowbar, which are 2 of the other ones that I play in my environment, then yeah, you could run this and Barb Spike, and I think that would be totally fine. But yeah, I love this style of card, and I will be talking about more of these coming up later in the set because there's just a lot of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think this card is most of the time, in most environments, like a side grade, where I think this is slightly better if you're not pushing synergies, because the equipment giving flying to a creature is more relevant in the mid to late game after you've traded off your 2/1. But if you're doing the synergy thing, Barb Spike makes 2 artifacts on ETB, so stuff like Kinson's Melter. Additionally, it's cheaper for stuff like Heartfire Hero to do the equip thing, because this you're only doing this once a turn. It's probably going to take up your entire turn to equip it. So I think when you're pushing synergies, Barb Spike gets a little better. One thing too, and I don't remember if we mentioned this, Job Select does give the creature type of the Job Select thing. So this gives a Knight typing. So that could come up from time to time where this is a Knight for people who care about that, if you're doing some sort of weird Eldraine tribal thing or whatever. So there is that small upside as well. But yeah, I think this is mostly a side grade, but probably marginally better in a non-synergistic context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you flipped a coin and told me one was better than the other based on the coin flip, I'd probably believe you. My gut tells me the 2 mana on the re-equip is just too much to pass up versus a 4 mana re-equip, but who knows? Maybe we should try it and just figure that out. Does move us into blue. I don't think blue got a ton here, and we're starting off with a Quistis Trape, which might be one of the most boring characters ever designed for one of the most boring games ever designed in all video gaming.
They really captured the flavor by making one of the most boring card designs in the set.
Sure did. Just make this extremely here's what it does. Okay, so Quistis Trape is I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly too. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary human wizard. Notably, wizard does matter in the context of the limited set. It has blue magic. When Quistis Trape enters, you may cast target instant or sorcery from a graveyard and spend mana as though it was any mana to cast that spell, and it exiles it instead. So you get to flash back a instant or sorcery from anyone's graveyard. No other trinket text here. I'm surprised they didn't tack on vigilance or tack on literally anything else here. It's just 3 mana 2/2 Snapcaster, a spell from anyone's graveyard. Notably, it can grab a spell from your opponent's graveyard, but I don't know. I think it's hard for a card like this to play out poorly, right? Because on 4 mana you can very often just flash back a Fatal Push or a Burst Lightning and hit something, and then it scales up if you can get more expensive spells later, and those sorts of cards are rarely bad. It's just, man, they did not want to push this beyond just the ability, right? And I am curious because the first card I think of is Slickshot Lockpicker, which is the OTJ plot guy that does a very similar thing. When it enters, you can cast an instant or sorcery from your own graveyard. But Daneelius made a point here that you don't like that comparison. I'm curious why you don't like the comparison there.
Yeah, so the disagreement I would have about these not playing well is I think that they don't actually play very well unless they give you some sort of buyout to make them better opening hand cards. So if you think about Lockpicker, you get to plot that on 3, even if you don't have anything to flash back yet, and then later on, recoup that tempo loss by casting it for free. And same for Halo Forger. Halo Forger is a card you can just this is Halo Forger. This is just the exact tech box of Halo Forger, but Halo Forger is a 3/1 flyer, whereas it's a 2/2. And the difference there is in Marks of Machines, you were just playing a Halo Forger on 3 quite often because it's just a reasonable body. It's not amazing, but it's a reasonable body to put in play on 3, and you're never doing that with this card. And so I think this card's actually pretty bad in your opening hand often, unless you specifically have like that Burst Lightning ready to go. And for that reason, I started higher on this card, and once I really started thinking about those play patterns of like, you're just never playing on this on turn 3. It's always a card that sits in your hand until you have something to flash it back with. I think that ultimately makes this significantly worse than the other options that we've seen.
Daneelius, you're a more disciplined man than I. I will die before I will cast a Halo Forger and not cast a spell out of somebody's graveyard.
There you go. Yeah.
I think this would be a lot cooler if it was like the first time we'd seen this effect at Uncommon, but between, Slick Shot, Lockpicker, Halo Forger, and I'm assuming we'll see more of these in the future. Like, this just doesn't have any bonus text and the other cards do. So I'm super not into it, even though I think if you just put this in a cube, like, it'd probably be fine. You'll probably get good use out of it.
The more I've talked and thought about this card, the lower I've gone. I think I'm going to join Daneelius. He's got it at like a D+, and I had it at a C. I think at best, this is a C- type card. Like, this just ain't it, Chief.
No, I mean, I think it's hard for a card like this to be terrible, especially given the way that decks that use these cards. And I don't want to discount the fact that it can grab a spell from your opponent's graveyard, right? Like, on 4, I imagine, like, you usually just cantrip this or something with like an opt in your graveyard, and that's not good enough, but obviously there's flexibility as the game goes on too. So,
but like, that isn't the floor of this card, right? The floor of this card is you drew your opening hand was like 3 lands.
The floor is it's a 3-mana 2/2 that doesn't do anything, but the cards like that, like, that is the floor of the card, but cards like this rarely play out to the point where like they never do anything. Like, you just never really in situations where
I disagree. I think there's a lot of times where I've plotted a Slick Shot Lockpicker and needed to set up a spell 2 or 3 turns down the road.
Yeah, Lockpicker has better but Lockpicker's a better card, like 100% a better card, but I'm never in a situation where I have, like, the only thing I can do is cast my Lockpicker. Like, the Lockpicker lets you dump the mana into it on turn 3, but like, it's rare that you just have nothing else to do on turn 3. It's just, that's the play when you have 3 mana and a Lockpicker.
I think what you're describing is just a really narrow effect ultimately, because I agree with you that like most of the time this is going to go into a deck where it's not a dead card very often, but that's the problem is it only, you have to put it into decks where it's not dead very often, and that just really limits its scope. So it's like, yes, when it makes a deck, it's probably going to be reasonably effective. I agree with you, but it's just really narrow because you have to set that up. You can't just put it in your average deck. It's got to be in a deck with lots and lots of cheap spells.
I do think this is actually a bit of a flavor fail because blue magic is magic you learn from your opponent, which the idea is you're casting spells out of your opponent's graveyard. That's where the blue magic flavor is in this card. Mm-hmm. But also, this is like, you don't ever put this card in your deck unless you can personally enable it, which I think is a bit of a flavor fail.
Yeah, they did. There's a couple blue mages here, and they handled it. Like, the Kamari card just copies your opponent's creatures, and it's like, okay, well, I get it, blue magic. But yeah, I think we can all agree they just, like, there's no sauce here. There's just nothing sauce going on with the card.
And to be fair, Quistis in the games, 0 personality. Like, in a game full of characters with no personality, Quistis is the most vanilla of them all.
And Quistis' whole thing is that she uses a whip as her, like, where's the whip? That's like her iconic weapon. But anyway, whatever. Let's talk some bonus sheet cards. So you guys pointed this out. I would have missed it completely, but a couple of these cards got downshift. I'm just going to talk about them together because they're known factors. We got Brainstorm and we got Counterspell as uncommons in the Arena client for the first time. We've had these cards on the Arena client, but only at rare, and this is the first time that they'll be uncommon and therefore eligible for the Jank Diver game in Peasant Cube. So actually get to talk about them here, and I don't know that there's too much to talk about that people wouldn't already know with Brainstorm and Counterspell. It's just where do they stack up versus the options that we already have. I think personally Brainstorm probably becomes Actually, I don't even think it becomes like the best cantrip in Peasant. I think Consider has way more synergies at Peasant, and I think Hard Evidence pulls a lot of weight. So I think Brainstorm is where I used to have it in the mainline cube before we got the fetch lands. There are some shuffle effects, the Lord of the Rings, land cyclers and the perilous lands from MH3 can do some Brainstorm things, but I think for the most part, I think Consider is probably better on average, and then Counterspell is Counterspell. It's just, do you think blue is enough of a detriment to make it worse than the other options at 2? I do not believe it is. I believe Counterspell is just the best 2-mana Counterspell you'll have on the Arena client in the Peasant 2-drop slot now. I could see an argument for that not being the case, though.
Yeah, hard disagree. As I think I've always had on this, that I think getting cards now is better than cards later. So the fact that your Brainstorm can find you a 3rd card deep on the turn you cast it, even if it means potentially setting up draws that aren't as great in the future, is usually better in Magic because your job is to not die now. More importantly, though, I think there's a few specific cards. The one that jumps to mind is Mindless Conscription as a huge bump for that card. Because this lets us both trigger it on our opponent's turn, as well as just reliably trigger that card. I think that card is somewhat difficult to trigger sometimes. I do think Hard Evidence is better, but that's because Hard Evidence is 2-for-1. Like it's always the best cantrip because it's not actually a cantrip; it's 2-for-1. So it's closer to like a Mole Drifter. I don't know. I'm always a fan of casting Brainstorm. I think people make a big deal about like it locking you out or whatever, but just play it better, build your deck better, whatever. If you're casting,
I never put any stock in that walkout argument. It does happen sometimes, but you weren't going to win the game where like with a different cantrip anyway. So like that part doesn't matter so much. But like Brainstorm's not an impressive card if you're not shuffling. I think Consider is a decent amount better. You just get value off of putting a card in your graveyard more often in Peasant Cube. I think Brainstorm's way better in the mainline cube, but in our specific Peasant Cube, I think Consider is significantly better than Brainstorm.
Yeah, I might be wrong. I might be, valuing it more because of how much I've, kind of played around with it at times in the mainline cube. But I don't know. Like it's one of those like, I'm gonna have to be proven wrong on it first. Like Brainstorm comes in with a bit of a history, and I think it's proven very powerfully. Even when we didn't have fetch lands in the mainline cube, I thought Brainstorm was the best pure cantrip in the cube.
Oh, see, yeah, I didn't. I thought Consider and Hard Evidence were both better before we got the fetches, but
again, I don't consider Hard Evidence. I'm never gonna. I don't even call that a cantrip. Like that doesn't count.
It definitely counts.
No, a cantrip.
It's in the same conversation.
It's just a card that replaces itself.
That's more like a creature.
Hard Evidence is a 1-mana 0/3 that draws a card. It's a 2-for-1. It's a totally different card.
I think Hard Evidence is more like is more like the white versions. On blanking on the
Inspectors. Yeah,
the white creatures. Yeah. So I'm somewhere in the middle of you two in the sense that like I think that what excites me the most about Brainstorm is the kind of blue-black draw 2, draw 3 space, and the fact that you can now do that for 1 mana at instant speed on your opponent's turn to trigger all your cards that care about that. I do think is quite relevant. And the one of the cool things about it, thinking about shuffle effects, is like, yes, we do have the landscapes from MH3, but we also have the Lord of the Rings land cyclers, and any cards that I can play with that make those better is very. I love those cards a lot, and making those cards better is cool. Also, we have the Storm Broods from TDM, which the Omen side of those shuffle your deck. So we do have more options at the moment. Another card that works well with this is Flood Pit's Drowner shuffles your deck as well. The final stage of the Bath Song shuffles your deck. There's Micromancer that shuffles your deck. The new Moogle obviously shuffles. So there's a fair amount of ways these days in Peasant, more than I thought, honestly, when I originally graded the card. To shuffle your deck. So I do think that you want a lot of those effects. I don't want to be playing the card without at least 3 shuffle effects, probably is what I'm aiming for, unless I'm playing in that blue-black space where I'm just looking to draw 3 for 1 mana and I can trigger my Mindless Conscription. So yeah, I'm definitely excited for the card. I think it's significantly better than Opt, which was the card that I'm comparing it with. Is it better than Consider? Sometimes, most of the time probably not, but sometimes for sure. So I think it's an exciting addition to the cube for sure. And for Counterspell, I'm not as high on Counterspell as you guys are. I think that in the vast majority of cases, maybe not the vast majority, but I think in the majority of cases, the Quench variants that we have, specifically the one from SNC where you can sack or
make disappear.
Make disappear.
Make disappear. Thank you. I think make disappear is often going to just be better because of the one and a blue as opposed to blue. I think that is a meaningful difference. But Counterspell is Counterspell. I think it's definitely worth playing with. I don't think there's really any question about it. So, but it's like a C for me in the sense that there are blue decks that I will play that won't run it because blue will not be the heavy color in the combination. So really quickly though, these are probably the two cards that I have the biggest bone to pick with in terms of the art, the FCA, the bonus sheet art. So Counterspell is called Wild Rose Rebellion. What about Wild Rose Rebellion is blue? That makes no sense to me at all. And the art itself is like white-red. This is a white-red card. Why is this Counterspell? That makes no sense to me at all. Having no knowledge of the game whatsoever, if you just showed me this card, I'd be like, this is nonsense. This makes no sense to me at all. And then Brainstorm is, as far as I can tell, an advertisement for a future game or a game that's like being released right now. There's literally...
It's a reference to Final Fantasy 14.
Okay, well, my issue with it is there is literally splash art that called where there's Endwalker is like you can look this up. You can Google this. Google Endwalker and go to the images, and you will find art that is not a Magic card that looks exactly like this, and it's just an advertisement for the game. And now that's a card in my pack. I feel like this is very much just literally an advertisement for a game. It's not like a character. It's not a moment. It's just an advertisement for a game. And I think that's very lame.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to this point in Final Fantasy 14 to tell you if it's like this is like 2 expansions away from where I'm at in the game. But yeah, I can't tell you if this is even like a flavorful card. Like, I don't know. I have never seen this scene. So yeah, I agree with you there. These are pretty bad uses of these cards. Wild Rose Rebellion feels like it should have been on like heroic reinforcements or something.
Exactly.
Yes.
Have you seen the Ristic study from this set? It's so atrocious. What they just slapped the stupid Unititus scene, but then they also made a card in the commander deck that is the same exact scene, but like illustrated by an actual artist instead of just the screen grab or whatever. And it just like, come on, it's also how the hell is Una and Titus in the water Ristic study? Like, what are you doing? Yeah, they again, very sauceless in the. Anyway, I hate this bonus sheet. I think it's absolute trash tier bonus sheet, but whatever. Gives us cards for the client, and we have other arts we can play with. So, also if you're just like a paper cube or whatever, you already had these cards, so we probably didn't need to spend so much time on them. But that's fine. So moving on to more new stuff. Swallowed by Leviathan. I got the impression Daneelius wasn't super high on this. I think this card is actually quite good. This is 2 and a blue for an uncommon instant. Choose target spell. Surveil 2. Then counter the chosen spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. So 3 mana counterspell territory with some selection. Obviously, like if you don't already have a graveyard, you're going to have to bin the 2 cards that you saw, and then you'll probably get to counter like a decent chunk of spells. And then if you actually have a graveyard, you're just getting Surveil 2 on top of a 3 mana spell, so or 3 mana counterspell.
I just see Exclude that can hit non-creatures.
That's what it feels like to me. I mean, it's not... There's a fail case here. You don't have a graveyard. Your opponent casts a spell and has like 3 extra mana up. Like, you're not going to get to counter everything every time, but you will the majority of the time. And we still play like Confounding Riddle, which gives you a choice between countering a spell or getting some card selection. And this feels like you kind of get away with both most of the time. And this is the exact type of card that like once you start playing stuff like this is why I like things like Consider more than Brainstorm, is like you just have incentives to fill up your graveyard for your Rise from the Tides and stuff like that. But I think this card reads very powerful, like an excellent 3 mana counterspell.
Yeah, I like this one a lot as well. I will agree this is one of those cards that does give a lot of value for Consider.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not down on the card. My issue is largely one of just alternatives. And so you mentioned Exclude. I don't think I would cut Exclude for this. Maybe that's wrong, but and then the other one is Saruman's Trickery, which to me is one of the better blue cards period in the queue, but I don't think I would cut Trickery for this. I have been trying out Refute lately, and I haven't really loved Refute, and I can certainly imagine trying this over Refute, but it's really, for me, it's just a question of alternatives, and I like the other, the top 2 3-mana counter spells that we currently have access to in Peasant, I like more than this, but if you're looking for more beyond those 2, I think this is fine.
I think it's definitely in the conversation with those other 3-mana counter spells, because they all kind of like breach the same grade, like letter grade, like maybe there's a plus or minus here and there, but they're all kind of very similar, very tight together. I think this one is probably better. I don't. It's also not 1 blue. It could have very easily been 1 blue. It's 2.
That
blue,
matters.
so.
That matters.
Yeah,
that's the biggest upside on the card for sure in my mind. I guess my biggest issue is just that like when you get up to 3 mana or more interaction in general in Peasant, I think what matters the most is the advantage that you're getting on top of the one. Like, what is the 2-for-1 that you're generating with the card? And here, Surveil 2, it's like, that's something. Like, how much is that really worth? And to me, that starts to push it in the direction of like a synergy card where you really do want to be taking advantage of the graveyard for this to stack up with something like, Trickery, which generates actual board presence, or Exclude, which actually draws you a card. So, if your graveyard is an important element of your blue section, then this gets obviously a lot better. But without that, I need my expensive interaction, which I do see 3 or more mana value interaction as being pretty expensive these days. I need to get the advantage that you're getting on top of just the removal spell or the interactive spell matters a lot, and I just don't know how important Surveil 2 is.
Yeah, I think this probably is worse than Exclude, but we explicitly don't run Exclude because in our environment, it basically took your green deck, made it go outside, pick its own hickory, and then come back inside to get whipped with it. So, yeah, we don't run Exclude. It was just like green just would, you would kind of just lose on turn 3 to that card quite frequently.
Next blue card, Sleep Magic. Another very flavorful one here. In Final Fantasy, if your character falls asleep, dealing damage to them will wake them up. So that's kind of the joke here.
Yeah, you're trying to do it, and the goal is to not use your really powerful characters because you're trying to do enough damage to just knock out the character. Just ping them, yeah.
Very, very cool design. It's blue mana for an aura. When it enters, tap the enchanted creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. And when the enchanted creature is dealt damage, you sacrifice the aura. So you wake it up if you deal damage to the creature. So part of the reason I really like this card, I think it's worse. I think we can all agree it's worse than Unable to Scream. And, Fresh Start, I think, is better than this, even with this being 1 mana. It is very, very cheap, though, and it taps the creature down, so it's a non-combatant. It does not remove abilities, which they've been doing a lot with, Unable to Scream, Fresh Start, so on and so forth. So, using this on a Blood Artist or whatever isn't effective. But it does get it out of combat if you're being proactive or, just need to get a creature to stop attacking you. The thing I really like is, like, the opportunities where it opens up, like, okay, how am I going to ping my creature to actually wake it up? And, how, like, a fight spell. I mean, can I use a fight spell to wake up my creature and stuff like that? I think that sort of, like, opportunity is actually very cool and neat little design. The card itself, I think, is actually pretty strong, though just worse than some of the other blue auras we've gotten over the last couple sets.
Yeah, adding even more ways to brick your aura in an environment with sack synergies and pixie synergies and, like, blue bounce spells. I don't know. Like, we're starting to get into the territory of it's just probably too easy to remove this, especially since green creatures are the ones you most want to use these effects on, and giving them the ability to, like,
Attic and Archer can fight your own creature, by the way, in case you didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of, you could push this too, or shove this,
playful
right?
shove. Yeah, that's gross.
Yeah.
If you just playful shove to unlock your creature and cantrip.
I'm not high on this one. I don't really like it. I mean, the design is cool, but I think we're getting into the territory of this is probably too easy to brick and 2-for-1 your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree. I like this a lot. I disagree that we can all agree that it's worse than Unable to Scream. I like this more than Unable to Scream. I'm not a big fan of Unable to Scream personally. But part of this is environment difference. Like, blue is the worst color in my environment, definitely. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that is it just doesn't play very well in, like, this to the board tempo game plan. Now, that's not the only way that blue can play, obviously. It plays well in a control shell, but those decks just don't perform super well in my environment. The worst performing decks in my environment right now are blue-black and blue-green. And to me, the big thing that blue needs desperately is cheap interaction. And Unable to Scream is kind of cheap interaction, but Unable to Scream plays really poorly in blue-green. And in the blue-green decks, at least I'm trying to push, because the slower blue-green decks have just not been performing lately. And so I'm trying to give blue-green a little bit more of a tempo orientation to at least have that option. And Unable to Scream is just not performing well in that slot, whereas this performs really well in that slot. Just 1 mana, reach out and kill something. And yes, you're right, like, not dealing with abilities is a downside, but there are situations where this is still upside, where, for instance, they have, like, a Glyph Elemental on their creature, and this just turns that off completely, whereas Unable to Scream doesn't. So, like, I think, yes, there are situations where this is worse. There's a lot of situations where it's better. And more importantly, blue just needs more of these effects, in my mind, like, desperately, in order to keep up in my environment. So, again, there might be some environment differences here, but I think this is a C+ in the sense that I can't imagine a blue deck in my environment that won't run this. And there's definitely blue decks in my environment where I would not want Unable to Scream. So yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, to put that into comparison, our last 5 trophy decks all had blue in them, and Unable to Scream is like arguably first pickable.
Yeah, environment differences is a big deal, and I would never assume anything other than, the different shapes of the cubes mean different effects perform well. I will say that one of the reasons why I like this in cube, actually, even compared to retail, is there's not a lot of fight in my environment that's left. I don't like fight effects. I want bite effects, and bite effects don't really work particularly well. They don't wake up the creature unless you're pointing your bite effect at your own creature, which is like, that's fine. Go for it. You're right. The playful shove effects do exist, and that is probably the area where this is at its worst. But at the very least, you still got your tempo hit in. Mm-hmm. It's still they use their sorcery speed damage effect. It's still not going to get to untap for another turn. So yeah, I think this is really strong if tempo is a thing that you're more concerned with in your blue section, and it definitely is for me right now. I'm interested to see how it plays, but I think this is like if I could write down a custom card that I thought blue needed for my environment, it would be very similar to this. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, now that I look at it, we don't have nearly as much fight left as I thought we did. It's mostly on creatures these days. So, I'll see that point that you're probably not fighting in our cube to wake this up outside of like Bridgeworks battle. But yeah, I'm probably also overselling Unable to Scream in the Peasant cube just a little bit. It is very, very good though. I think it's one of the best removal spells in the cube. This is good. I mean, this is no doubt good. Like, this is a strong card because it costs 1 mana. It's just the kind of design I personally don't like a lot, and that's probably influencing my thoughts on it a lot.
Yeah. It can be hard sometimes for blue to get over, like, a generous ent that is resolved or something like that. So maybe this gives you an out to some of those things.
Yeah, blue just not in any need of help in our cube. It's probably the difference, the biggest one.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Last blue card, Cargo Ship. This is 1 in a blue for a 2/3 vehicle with flying and vigilance and crew 1, and you can tap it to make colorless mana. You can spend that mana only to cast artifact spells or activate an ability of an artifact source. So basically all in on an artifact theme here. I guess if you have a flying theme, you're probably more interested. This is just a evasive little mana dorky type thing for an artifact-centric deck. Teld, I don't know if this was like the type of thing you actually wanted to try out. It does feel like secret gold card territory to me, which is what I don't like about it, but I do think it'd play like fine in the blue-white artifact decks.
Yeah, I'm not like dying to try this one out, but I think in terms of what it's doing, it's pretty good. Like Skyskiff is a fine card. This is Skyskiff with vigilance that also taps for mana, and like you can sometimes do both in the same turn. I agree, probably secret gold card territory at a certain point, but like if you're just a blue aggressive-y tempo deck, I don't think that's something you're doing in our cube right now, but if it ever is a thing you're doing, this is a totally fine card in that archetype too. I like that this is a bridge card between multiple different sort of lanes of potential cube environments. Like this in our cube, it's not going to be a bridge card very much, but in some cubes it will be.
If I'm recommending this card to people, it's if you need to care about artifacts outside of just 1 2-color pair. Artifacts needs to be a thing that blue cares about generally in your environment, and then this becomes, I think, a card worth considering.
Exactly.
In my environment, artifacts is a thing that I care about across all colors, which is the reason why I'm considering it. If I will say though, if this wasn't blue, I wouldn't care about it. The reason why I care about it is that it's blue, because blue is the color that gets the least or the worst options for just generic artifact cards, in my opinion. So if this was red, if this was white, there's better cards. But as a blue card, blue really, really struggles in my environment for playable artifact cards to pair with things like Zoetic Glyph or Animating Fairy or other things like that. So, this is essentially Oaken Siren. This is basically the exact same text as Oaken Siren, but Oaken Siren is not a vehicle. But Oaken Siren's like a 1/2, and this is a little bit larger. This also can tap for mana the turn it comes down, which definitely could be relevant in some circumstances, whereas Oaken Siren couldn't. And Oaken Siren isn't like super off the mark in my environment. It's just not quite good enough. So I'm going to test this for a season, see how it plays. I don't have a lot of faith that it'll stick around, but the main thing I care about again is I care about artifacts in general in my cube. Every 2-color pair can play with an artifact theme, and blue just is really starved for like playable kind of pawns for those artifact decks. So I think it's interesting to try, but not a world beater for sure.
Role player, fine role player. Moves us into black. First card up, Reno and Rude, the Turks. 1 in a black for a 2/1 uncommon legendary human assassin with menace. 2 mana, 2/1 menace. When Reno and Rude deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. Then you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, you may play the exiled card this turn and spend mana of any type to cast it. So 2 mana, 2/1 menace, hits your opponent. You have the option to sack an artifact or creature to play the top card of their library. I think the immediate comparison, Vampire Gourmand is a perfect comparison here. That's the 2 mana 2/2 that you can sack a creature to make unblockable and then draw a card. Which that card gets clowned on a little bit in our queue, but I think people just don't play the decks where it's really good. It's like not a universally playable black card in every black color pair. It's more of like a red, black, white, black, gold card. Reno and Root is occupying very similar space. Menace up front is nice. Not having to sack something to give menace is nice, though drawing from your opponent's deck typically worse than drawing from your own deck, especially in Peasant Cube. So a little bit of trade-off there with the Vampire Gourmand comparison.
Yeah, I'm not a Vampire Gourmand believer, and this is worse Vampire Gourmand, so I'm not high on this one. I think you can play it without it being embarrassing. It's got, like you said, native menace means that it's sometimes going to get in attacks without having to sacrifice things, but you don't have the option of late game using it to just dome your opponent for 2 every turn because it's just going to get blocked and die. But if you care about legendary synergies or equipment or something, maybe you can make this work. I'm not high on this one though, especially because, like you said, especially in Peasant Cube, drawing from your opponent's deck usually sucks.
Yeah, I think there's interesting, again, potential environment differences stuff here, though I also don't love the card, but definitely it's worse in a synergy space or from a synergy perspective. It's worse than Gourmand. That being said, Gourmand demands synergy to do anything. You know, it's like, it's just a 2/2 if you're not doing synergy stuff with it. This is at least a 2 mana 2/1 with Menace. Sorry. It's a 2 mana 2/1 with Menace if you're not synergizing with it. And again, because you get to attack first and see what the card is, it's like you don't have to sacrifice anything to this card, where you have to sacrifice something to Gourmand for it to do anything at all. Otherwise, it's just a bear. So I think if you're, the more you care about synergy and specifically the sacrifice stuff with Gourmand, then the better Gourmand gets in comparison to this. The less you care about synergy, the better. And by the way, that works both directions, because the less your cube is about synergy, the better your opponent's cards get for you.
Sure.
When your opponent's playing like a super synergistic deck and you're on the complete opposite side, well, then your opponent's top decks are going to be a lot worse. But the less synergy is important, the better this gets. The reason why I came down on this card, first of all, I hate 2 mana 2/1s. I hate them so much. You're right; they get shoved off the cliff. They get just eaten up by everything. So
well, this has 3 mana 2/1s if you're interested. Galore.
Yeah, God.
So many 3 mana 2/1s.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the stat line in this. And the other reason I was planning on trying it, even with the stat line, just because I think it's a fascinating card. The thing that I realized does make it kind of difficult to play with is, compared to Gourmand, you can like play Gourmand on 2, and then on turn 3 you can play your like Dunlin Kerbane or whatever, your 3 mana thing that makes 2 permanents. You attack with Gourmand, you sacrifice something, you draw your card. You can't do that with this card because you need to leave up the mana to then cast your opponent's effect. So this really demands like 1 mana cards that you're happy to sacrifice. There's a few that would work reasonably well with it, like Spyglass Siren is a card that comes to mind, or the Blood, what's it called? Blood Fountain is another kind of card that would work well with this, but it kind of needs those sorts of effects to really maximize its potential. So given that and the body size, I think it's probably a not play for me, but it's a fascinating card. And the more 1 mana kind of trinkety things like Chromatic Star or whatever that you're looking to actively sacrifice, the better that this gets. But yeah, overall I agree. I don't love Gourmand. I do think this is enough different than Gourmand that it's worth at least considering, but probably not going to get there for me.
Almost an artifact synergy card more than it is a...
I was going to say, Chris and I are actually talking about this card for the Neo Cube, where we want the lower power level and we want the artifact synergies. So I think there's definitely spots for this, but in kind of the broader context of Peasant Cubes, what they typically look like, I'm not super.
Yes, Reno and Rude next to the Wandering Emperor and Kaito Shizuki. Actually,
not
too off of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a Japanese company. It works out perfect. Flavor's perfect. 10 out of 10.
Yeah. Ship it. All right, next one. I think this one's pretty quick, but I do think it's interesting. So Albed Salvagers, 2 and a black for a 2/3 uncommon human artificer warrior. Whenever this creature or another creature or artifact you control dies, target opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. So I read this card initially, kind of dismissed it as here's the Blood Artist of the set, because that's another one we get kind of every set, but then kind of backed it up a little bit, and I was like, you know what? This obviously is like worse Marionette Apprentice, which is not this card's fault. It's Marion Apprentice's fault for being the card that it is. But compared to like Bastion of Remembrance, I actually really like the comparison. And what went through my head was like, oh, you know what? This is kind of like Vampire Spawn. If you trigger it like at least one other time before it dies, it does the Vampire Spawn thing. And then it dawned on me that like, okay, this is actually Bastion as a creature instead of an enchantment. The distinction matters, but you know, it also picks up pings off of artifacts and stuff. So I think there's actually enough going on here with like the aristocratic synergies, if that's a thing that you're pushing, that the card, despite being like very, very boring and so, you know, text that we've seen a million times before, is actually quite good. The body is not impressive or anything like that, but you know, I think the Bastion comparison is very interesting because you're trading off like a persistent permanent for a better starting line and a more, you know, expansive, you know, death trigger here.
Yeah, after I stopped and thought about this card, I could not unsee Peregrine Took in my dreams about this card. And so I think it's more interesting than Bastion because you get to live that dream of like, I'm going to convert a bunch of food tokens into card draw that Siege Rhinos my opponent, you know, a bunch of times. And whether that dream actually becomes reality is debatable, especially if you're not doing the squirrel food thing in green-black. But the closer you are to doing that sort of thing, I think the better and better this card gets. I think this card's going to scale into Peasant Cube future better than Bastion as well. Obviously easier to remove, but also flip side of that, easier to recur. You can use things like Lively Dirge to bring this back, which you can't do with Bastion. It's easier to tutor up creatures or like, you know, find them with Militia Bugler type cards. So there's give and take on this card, but I think it's way more interesting than Bastion, which I think in our cube environment, novelty and interesting things that make you think about ways you could synergize is something we value more than raw throughput or like reliability necessarily.
Yeah, I've come up a lot on this card the more that I think about it. I think basically if you're not on kind of the modern peasant plan of artifacts matter, which I would just argue, you know, if you're not, get with the program because it's just way better than not caring about artifacts, in my opinion. As long as you care about artifacts, I definitely think this should get played over Bastion. If you don't, then I think Bastion's probably better. If you're just doing creature stuff, then keep playing Bastion because the 2 permanents that you get with Bastion, I do think matters a lot, especially for Bastion style decks. So, but if you care about artifacts, this is an exciting card to me. It opens up a lot of possibilities.
And I mean, even in our cube, like, which isn't probably quite as far along the artifact trail as yours, we've moved blue-white into an artifact theme. There's definitely themes that run into red-black, like with Sokinzen Smelter and this card now. That's almost certainly going to make it in. Green-black is slowly becoming the food. That's their new favorite thing is green-black food that shows up like every other set. So yeah, I think we're definitely heading in a direction where it's going to be impossible to keep up with peasant design and not embrace the artifact life, at least for the foreseeable future.
I was going to mention this in the mainline review as well, but it was directly underneath Sephiroth, and it looks like Dookie Poo Poo compared to Sephiroth, so I'm just not going to mention it in that same breath, but could be interesting for being such a kind of boring design. Next one, I'll cover this real quick. I don't know what you guys thought on it, but I think this sort of stuff is kind of cool. It's so there's a one-off meld pairing for whatever reason. I guess it just fits the characters. I've played this game. I don't remember anything about them turning into something together, but so it's a combination of cards. The first one is Fang Fearless Lassie. It is 2 and a black for a 2/3 legendary human warrior. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you draw a card and lose a life. The ability triggers only once each turn. So notably, there's no way to facilitate that. It's just a grave break payoff on a 3-mana 2/3. And then we have Vanille Cheerful Lassie, which is 3 and a green for a 3/2 legendary human cleric. When it enters, mill 2 cards, then return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And this one has the meld ability on it. So at the beginning of your first main phase, if you own both of these cards and control both of these cards, you can pay 3 green to transform them and meld them into Ragnarok Divine Deliverance, which is a 7/6 with Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, and Haste. And when it dies, destroy target permanent and return target non-legendary permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So basically a gigantic vanilla, or not vanilla, keyword soup creature that dies, kills the thing, and brings back another thing from your graveyard. So the backside obviously sounds like very appealing. It's like, ooh, I want to play that card. The front sides both individually leave room to be desired. Like they're not individually powerful cards. Vanilla is fine as a Gravedigger style card, a 3/2 for 4, but obviously we have better versions of that with beneath the skin,
under the skin,
and then Fang is obviously like not very good at all. Though I would argue it does fit the context of our cube. It's just not a super powerful card. This is the type of thing, and I will apologize to Teld ahead of time if this is like just not the type of thing you're into. But this is the type of thing that I really love for cubes. I think players might get excited about the possibility of having these cards come together, and I actually think Fang fits our cube in to some degree enough, and Vanille is like has a high enough floor of a card that I wouldn't mind playing these two, but I'm not gonna like push that this is some B level super powerful synergy given how much mana it takes and the kind of like floor of the individual cards.
Yeah, I actually like both of these cards individually. I mean, Fang, I think Fang is kind of engine-y and probably ends up being pretty good, come to think of it. I don't know. I guess like losing one life in your green-black grindy deck is awkward, but like this gray break stuff is pretty easy to bed into your deck, and it's not even all that difficult to get to do it, twice per turn cycle, which turns this into like Night's Whisper on a 2/3 every turn if you want it to be. And then Vanille is not super exciting, but I'm a big fan of when your Grave Diggers can't miss, because the downside of those cards, much like with the sort of slick shotty, like we were talking about with Quistis earlier, is like those cards can whiff sometimes. And so when you get to Mildew and now you can't really whiff. I mean, this is a cool pair of cards, because I think both of them are unexciting, but you could justify them. And then the flip side, if you get to live the dream once, is probably worth having them in the cube. I don't know if we'll find room for them, but I don't think they're completely embarrassing, would be my short of it.
Yeah, the thing that sells me a little bit is that Fang actually fits what like a lot of our black decks are doing already. If you're not doing like Insidious Roots style stuff, then like I don't see why you would make room for this pair, because you have to play Fang for the pair. But I think it gets over the hump by kind of fitting into decks that we already have in our environment.
Yeah, I tried the Grave Break stuff this season because of y'all, and it has not performed very well so far. We'll see if we keep it around for another season or not. So for me, Fang is not a particularly exciting card. Vanille as just being a worse under the skin, I think is kind of tough to justify. But what I'm maybe interested in trying with this is something that some cube owners do, where you put in just one of the two cards basically, and you say if you draft one, then you just get the other during deck building, and basically just making this a green black gold card, so people can kind of chase the dream of Ragnarok, from time to time. I don't think that would be a thing that I do for more than like a season, just as like a fun one-off. But I think it's worth calling out, especially if your cube gets played a lot, giving people kind of these side quests from time to time, something that isn't going to necessarily last in the cube for a long time. But if they get, if somebody actually gets to do the Ragnarok thing one time, they're going to, feel pretty great about it. So I think it could be a fun, one-off thing to do for a season. But for me, neither of these cards individually get there.
And then it gets bounced.
And so I'm not going to have them. Exactly. And then it gets bounced and you're sad, but
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is though, is that side quests are already in the set. This I think is more of a main quest event.
Okay.
I see what you're doing there. So yeah, this is not like, must play meld pair, but I do like meld. I like when it's achievable, but like I think the only one that's ever been below rare is the stupid Graph Rats nonsense.
Yeah, not good enough.
So like it's the type of mechanic that's like, look how cool it is, but I never actually get to do it, and like this actually seems achievable. So I like it. I don't think it's super powerful, but I like it. So I will give the next one to Daneelius here, because I don't know how to pronounce the name.
I'm definitely going to. I think it's Gaius Van Baelsar. I have no idea.
That's pretty close. I think it's Gaius von Baelsar. Yeah,
Gaius Van Balsac.
Okay. So it's a 2/2 black for a legendary creature, human soldier. It's a 3/2. And when it enters, you can choose one. Each player sacrifices a creature token of their choice. Each player sacrifices a non-token creature of their choice. Or each player sacrifices an enchantment of their choice. When I originally saw this, I was not interested in it really at all. I don't think that the style of card, like the creature that makes both players sacrifice a creature, is very good. And the one that is very good is a Cursed Marauder, and it's way better than this, obviously. So what got me excited about it when I thought about it more is that last line. Each player sacrifices an enchantment of their choice. That kind of turns this into a Witch Enchanter sort of a variant, like giving black access to kind of a Ravenous CubeCobra for enchantments that has other utility. It's not like you'll never choose one of the first two modes, especially if you're going up, for instance, against a Job Select / for Mirrodin style equipment, and you can just play this and nuke the creature, I think that's definitely going to come up, where you don't have to sacrifice something. I think that definitely will come up. So I think play patterns on this are pretty reasonable, and the fact that it gives black access to some enchantment removal, I don't really like the other enchantment removal options that black has right now, and like feed the Swarm, and there's one other. I don't play those. I don't think they quite get there, but this to me could be a card that maybe does get there and gives black some ways to interact with enchantments, which, as we've mentioned many times over the last few set reviews, I do think that's a pretty important thing that you want to think about for your cube, is making sure there's plenty of disenchant variants, because a lot of the enchantments and artifacts are completely busted. So all that being said, I think this is a fine option if you're looking to give black access to that effect. It's worse than Ravenous Chupacabra. It's worse than Chupacabra Echo. So, will you have space for it in your environment? That your mileage may vary, but I think it's an interesting card.
Yeah. Looking at our black section, the only cards that, debatably you would, because Bastion, I assume, is going to get cut here in this next update. So at that point, you're down to Mindless Conscription and Cadaver Lab as really the two cards that you kind of want to have sit in play, because Momentum Breaker and Nowhere to Run, it doesn't really matter unless you're planning on picking those up. So I do kind of like the shout that this is a way for black to interact more favorably with enchantments, because there are quite a number of very good ones in the cube at this point. And the other two modes will come up, but I think you can break parity on the enchantment mode frequently enough that I'm interested in this card, even if I don't necessarily think it's going to be crazy powerful. But there are definitely some synergies too with these cards, obviously, where your opponent, you both sack a non-creature, but I'm sacking my, my Reassembling Skeleton or my Archfiend's Vessel or something that I want in the graveyard, and then you're sacking a real creature. It's going to backfire from time to time, but I think having all of these knobs on it means that this is going to play out closer to a Chupacabra or like a Rexage more often than not.
Mm-hmm. Is this character like known for like killing summons or something? Is that why it is like their flavor behind the enchantment removal?
Yeah, so he's I can't remember if he's like exactly his position, but he's like one of the leaders of this empire in Final Fantasy 14. And I'm sure there's some people who are really deep into that game who could tell you more, but I'm pretty loose on the plot because it's so long. But basically, he helps create or runs the Ultima weapon. It's a big boss fight at the end of Final Fantasy 14's main story quest. And they were basically, the way they made Ultima in that game is they took a bunch of Eidolons or summons and jammed them into Ultima and used it to power its engine or something would be the short of it. So yeah, he's kind of got like some things with control, with like taking care of and killing or controlling summons. He's also the guy that is incidentally responsible for the wrath when we get to the mainline set. The such devastation, that was not my intention. That's this guy who says that. That's quoted on that card.
Man, there's so much dissonance between the names of Final Fantasy characters across different games, because like all the old ones are like Jack and Sid and John, and then the Final Fantasy 14's like Gaius Van Balsar, and it's like, oh my god, like what the hell. All right, another quick touch here. I think just a quick mention and then move on. Poison the Waters, 1 in a black for a sorcery. Choose one. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn, or target player reveals their hand. You may choose an artifact or creature and they discard it. So kind of a little shrivel effect versus a divest or whatever you want to call this modality. But we've seen a lot of these spells over the last few sets. There always seems to be a black choose one or another thing. We saw Whale of War in just the last set, and there's like Seeker's Folly, Cleave of Shadows, all sorts of stuff like that. Daneelius, did you have anything like super like important to say about this one? It just feels like a modal spell you could play, but like kind of two weakish effects.
My word on all these effects is I do think it matters that you have shrivel-like effects in your environment to make sure that Go Wide doesn't just kind of run away with things. And I think you want to just be really intentional about how many you include and, which ones. So I don't think I'll add this. I think Whale of War is probably better, but it's just something for cube creators to keep in mind. We have a lot of these style of effects. You do want some of them, and I think you just want to be really careful about which ones you select.
Mm-hmm. And this is nice if you are for some reason still on like Agonize and Remorse or Check for Traps or whatever. This feels like an upgrade to that. Just gives you an extra option on top of them.
Yeah, I don't really love it, but these -1 mini sweepers that have flexibility like this this is not a card that's going to show up in a cube and you're going to be embarrassed to have it there.
Yeah, it'll get the job done. The -1 sweepers are effective in Peasant cubes. I added this card. I don't think you guys are very high on it, but I kind of like it. So It's the Final Days. It's 2 black for a sorcery at uncommon. Create 2 tapped 2/2 black horror creature tokens. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, you make tokens equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. So very obvious immediate comparison is Moan of the Unhallowed, right? Which is the same exact mana cost, but it makes 2/2 untapped zombies rather than horrors, right? This makes tapped creatures, and that's probably the thing that mostly kills it. Moan of the Unhallowed also has flashback for 7 mana. The thing here is that the flashback cost of 6 does make this basically Rise from the Tides for creatures instead of spells, and I think Rise from the Tides is a very, very powerful build-around style payoff for spells that I could see this also being basically the same thing for creatures, which I don't know which one's harder to get in your graveyard, spells or creatures. I would imagine creatures are a little bit harder, but where I envision this is like you're trying not to actually cast the front half. You can. It's not great to make, 4 mana, just a bunch of tapped dudes, but get this into your graveyard by discarding it or something, and then, flash it back later. I imagine Rise from the Tides just turbos out more bodies than this ever could, because we saw that with Revenge of the Rats, right? It just wasn't the case that Revenge of the Rats was always making a ton of creatures, but I do think there's a comparison to Rise from the Tide, which I do believe is a very strong card, though obviously the comparison to Moan of the Unhallowed is the one that you probably should be making, because that's the cheaper mode, and this obviously doesn't get there over Moan of the Unhallowed.
Yeah, I mean, this card compared, Revenge of the Rats kind of got us, it wasn't a very good card, but we left it in for a while hoping it would do something, and it did a couple of neat things, but not consistently enough. I think this card having an actual floor is kind of cool, because Revenge of the Rats would frequently just be, rotting in your hand. You had to get it into your graveyard pretty much, because early game you just got no value out of it. This is obviously worse than Moan on the front end, and it's probably an overall worse card because Moan just makes a bunch of dudes to block with. But there's definitely a dream here, and maybe I'm just a sucker for these kind of cards because I see this and I'm like, how bad could it be?
Pretty bad. I think it could be pretty bad.
You have it at D+ here.
I think saying that this has a floor is not really true. I think that if you're ever casting this on the front side, it means that the game was going really well for you anyways, and I just don't think that matters much to me at all. I do think that the comparison with Revenge and I suppose Rise from the Tide is relevant. Revenge is a card we are still trying. It did trophy once, which allowed it to stay in the cube for another season. And is this better or worse than Revenge? I can't tell, because 6 mana is a lot different than 4 mana on the flashback side, but you do get 2/2s instead of 1/1, so you don't need to necessarily have gone as hard. But in our experience, when you're flashing back Revenge, you're winning, because it doesn't matter that they're 1/1s. You made 10 of them, so who cares? So I don't know. I might flip this for Revenge for a season to see how it plays. I don't know how good Revenge is yet. Again, it trophied 1 time, and other than that, it's done basically nothing. So I'm not at all interested in the front side of this. I don't think it's actually I don't think it's a reasonable buyout. I think you're losing the game a lot when you have to do that. And the backside, yes, it could be a more powerful build around than Revenge. I just don't see it being that different. So I don't know. It seems kind of like a side grade to me for Revenge, and I don't know that Revenge is good enough. So I have it as a D+. I might try it for the season and see if it plays better.
I think I want this to be good, but I think in reality it's probably not, is my problem. It's also the art is pulling a lot of weight for it. This is some really gnarly art for a non-rare.
I see this card, and it does strike me as the kind of card that is just I can fix it. It's
for real this time. All right, Daneelius, do you want to take this next one? I have this as I'll just preface this by saying I have this as a D, and I actually just kind of want to give it an F, but sell me on it, I guess.
This is Black Mage's Rod. It's 1 and a black for an artifact equipment. It has job select, so it makes the 1/1. And it says equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent and is a wizard in addition to its other type. So this is like a mechanic in the set where the wizard tokens and different wizards have this kind of Firebrand Archer effect of when you cast a non-creature spell, you get to deal damage. So this is essentially Firebrand Archer, but on a job select equipment instead of just a creature. And that makes it, in my mind, significantly better, way better. Not even really very close to Firebrand Archer in my mind. Again, I've talked about why I love this template so much.
It's just the same card.
There you go. Yeah, that's why I like this template so much. Is it's an artifact, it's a token, it's a non-creature spell in the stack, it's a creature in play. It makes multiple objects for your go wide, attrition deck. So I like the template enormously. The actual card text itself, when you just cast it as a 2-drop, I don't love it. So that being said, I've been really looking for a black 2-mana artifact that I'm excited to play, specifically like a 2 objects for 1 object that I'm looking to play. So I think I'm definitely going to test this. I don't have a strong sense of whether it'll be good enough, but giving the equipment doesn't do nothing. It's like when you trade this off and put this on a creature again. There's a lot of non-creatures in my environment. Like half of the cube basically is non-creatures. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult for this to get in for a decent amount of plink damage. That on top of just the template being something I'm so interested in has me relatively excited about the card. But I understand if you don't like the template, then you're not going to like the card because the card itself is just Firebrand Archer. So
okay, hear me out. Osseous Stick Twister.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, I like that card.
Any lifelinker, yeah.
I actually
this isn't even that. What? This isn't even that good with us. It's 3 mana to equip. This is basically nothing equipment.
Yeah, it makes your Osseous Stick Twister threaten 3 damage when you do the trigger, and every time you cast a spell, you gain a life. You suddenly are draining.
Oh my god! And it makes it a wizard too.
And it makes it a wizard for your synergies. Yeah. All right. So other than that, some other things that I wanted to note are like completed Huntmaster. This is 2 cards you can convert into incubators. Sure. With that card, we're running Sokens and Smelters. So like once you've used the Black Mage's Rod, you can do it. You can obviously reset it with Pixie stuff. Those decks tend not to play as many instants and sorceries, so the value there may be mixed. I kind of like this card though.
Non-creature doesn't have to be instant sorcery. It's just non-creature.
Oh, you're sure right. I keep defaulting to instant and sorcery, but you are right. This is the prowess text. I'm closer to Daneelius than Tim on this one. I don't necessarily think it's incredible, but this again could be like I'm a sucker for this effect because like I see a Coruscation Mage and I start salivating. But like I'm a fan. Like I don't know, there's synergies you can do with like you can Eviscerators inside it. It makes 2 game objects. How bad could it be?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is it makes 2 game objects, but like the combined game object that it is on its own before you're doing other stuff with it is just a bad card. It's just a terrible card.
It's a synergy card. It's a hardcore synergy card.
Yeah, you need other stuff to like I don't want to play a card that's whole like I don't want to play a 2-mana 2/1 whose whole purpose is to be sacrificed to other cards. Like I want to play a 2-mana 2/1 that holds its own and then like and maybe there is like obviously we had comps that did that and were good playable cards, we'd be playing them, but I just don't see it. I don't see the equip 3 to give +1/+0 and then still have mana to ping your opponent for a damage. I don't know. I'm not excited by that at all.
You can sack it to back for seconds.
Yeah. I don't think the card is good, and the fact that I want to feed it to something else just to like do something with it to me isn't really a selling point.
Hear me out. Can I interest you in a blacksmith's talent?
What is that?
There we go.
No, you can't because I can just play good equipment. I can just play other good equipment. I don't. That's the auto equip one or the double strike one or something.
Yeah, it's a card we added recently that has played out really well in our environment because I play a lot of these job select style equipments and. Anyways, but we don't need to talk more about it. I think our feelings are well known.
How about this next one though? It's another job select equipment. So this is a Dark Knight's Great Sword, 2 and a black for with job select. The equipped creature gets +3/+0 and is a knight in addition to its other types. And the equip cost is pay 3 life, which you can only activate once each turn. They didn't want you to kill yourself or some shit. I don't know. 3 mana +3/+0, and you can basically move it right away. So this is the one where like the creature is terrible, right? It's a 3 mana 3/1, or I guess it's a 3 mana 4/1. But what you're really trying to do is just move it right away to something where you get a big hit in, and hopefully like if your creature has lifelink or cares about power or something, you get more out of it. So this one I actually do like because the equip cost is like something manageable that lets you do something with it right away. And this is not one that you're looking to necessarily sacrifice. This is one where the actual boost of the equipment is the thing that matters.
Yeah, it's so funny because Teld and I both flipped on this versus the last one because for me, this is a much worse synergy piece. And you care more about the equipment itself. I care more about just the fact that, I get 2 objects for 2 mana, whereas this is 2 objects for 3 mana. But the one saving grace for this is lifelink. And if you have, again, Stick Twister is insane with this, Ruin Lurker Bat, what's the black 2-drop that has lifelink that's insane? Deep Cavern Bat. Like those cards with this seem like kind of insane to me. So depending on the density of lifelink in your environment, I think this gets way better. Also, obviously, if you're trying to do trample stuff with green, you play a 2-drop trampler. There are a few 2-drop, 3/2 tramplers, and then you play this on 3 and immediately move it over. There are some definitely interesting synergies you can get up to with this. But I don't like this nearly as much for the template of 2 objects. And, you know, all the things that I like about the 2-mana versions of this, this definitely is worse than those, but the equipment is more interesting, and so there is some application. But overall, I like this a little bit less than the last card. Sure.
Yeah, I'm somewhere between like a D plus and a C minus on this one, and I can't help but look at this. And the one thing that keeps me on it, because it is 2 game objects for 3 mana, and I'm not super interested in the equipment, except I am interested in a 5/2 Mouse Soldier Knight creature.
Yes.
For 1
yes. That is very good with mouse. Yep.
I mean, yeah, I think there's just enough synergy to make this card something that I'm interested in. I want to preface that by saying, like, I don't think this card replaces like a good solid 3-drop black creature or something that we're already playing. The card is bad though. The card is bad like on its own. If you're not re-equipping somewhere, it's just a 3-mana 4/1. So you do have to.
That's okay. Don't worry, folks. I'll talk Tim into trying both of these terrible cards. It'll be good.
Yes. Yes.
Talk,
maybe
Tim. Talk.
All right, next one, maybe also a terrible card, but I felt like I had to mention this one because I think it's kind of cool, and maybe it's another dream card, like not a slam dunk card. So, side quest Hunt the Mark is 3 black for an enchantment. When it enters, destroy up to 1 target creature. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under an opponent's control this turn, you make a treasure token. Then, if you control 3 or more treasures, you transform it into Yasmat Ultimate Mark, which is a 5/6 legendary dragon with 1 in a black, sack another creature or artifact. It gains indestructible and tap it. So kind of that new age regenerate ability. So 5-mana removal spell is what this is going to be. 5-mana sorcery speed removal spell is what this is going to be, like a pretty large percentage of the time. It makes a treasure, not like a huge selling point. If you have other treasure tokens, you might be able to flip it quicker. I think 5-mana sorcery speed removal is just like, you just can't do that. Though it is an enchantment, you can pick it up, you can reuse it, blah blah blah. I think the back half, if you get that kind of incidentally, is a strong card without being like, oh, look what I got off of doing this. It doesn't have evasion or anything like that. But also weird to see these super bosses like Yasmat and Omega as uncommons instead of like mythic rares or whatever. But this is I want to live this dream. I think the card is cool. Yeah, I wouldn't try to sell you very hard on it though.
Yeah. I love the design of this card, but even when I think I was the one that originally posted it and was basically like, if this cost 4, I'd be all in on it because I just don't I don't care at that point. It's just like I'll find a way to make this happen. At 5, it's like, all right, we're probably dead a lot before we get to cast this, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are.
Or it just doesn't catch you up in any meaningful way.
Yeah. Too expensive for Peasant. But I agree. Love the card. Love it in retail. Too expensive for Peasant.
Yeah. Teld, why don't you close out black with these last 2 cards?
Yeah, so these are some ones I added, not because I necessarily think they're good, but because I think they're pretty unique and worth talking about. So first up's Phantom Train. So this is 3 and a black for a 4/4 artifact vehicle with trample, and sacrifice another artifact or creature, put a +1 counter on the vehicle. It becomes a spirit artifact creature in addition to its other types until end of turn. Notably, it does not have a crew cost. So you have to use the sacrifice. But the reason I put this on here is it is, to my knowledge, the one of, if not the only, open-ended sacrifice an artifact or creature enablers. It also happens to be the kind of card that can potentially combo off with like fling style effects if you're doing any of that. So there's definitely some dream and some synergy here, though I think for most environments this is probably not good enough. But again, I don't know if we've seen this exact style of effect before, so it's kind of hard because like it does have a crew cost of 0, but the cost is we have to keep feeding it stuff. But it's also huge with trample in black, so I don't know. I think it's bad, but like this could be a surpriser.
I think the open-endedness of it is what's interesting. It's a combo card essentially to me, but the fact that it's 4 mana is what just kills it. Like if it cost 2 or 3, I'd be at least intrigued by it. But I think at 4 mana as purely a synergy piece that still just gets picked off by any removal spell, and you're sad. I think it doesn't get there.
Daneelius, if I told you could suplex this Phantom Train, would that mean anything to you?
It would, only because I know the set really well already and know what suplex does. But yes,
okay. It's an FF6 meme weme you can suplex the Phantom Train and it looks really goofy and stupid. That's the reason. The whole reason those cards are in this set is for the suplex the train meme. Also, notably, this thing dies to Phoenix Down, so watch that. Watch out for that in retail limited. You're gonna go all in. They're gonna Phoenix Down your train.
Just die to the face up Phoenix Down. That's great. Yeah, so the other card I have on here is Tonberry, which is a single black for a 2/1, and it's a Salamander Horror that enters tapped with a stun counter on it, so you're going to be a couple of turns where you get to have access to it. But during your turn, it has First Strike and Death Touch. And this is one of the first cards we saw from the set, and I really love the design. So Tonberries are a almost exclusively late game enemy in Final Fantasy, and their whole shtick is they are these cute little green dudes that like slowly walk at you. And if you give them enough time to get to you, they will stab you, and they are basically almost always going to one-shot your characters. In most Final Fantasies, it's like an actual unavoidable one-shot. The only flavor thing I don't like on this card is that they are also usually really, really high in HP, so 1 toughness is a little weird, but for a game balance, I get why that had to be. I don't actually think this card's good, but like, have we seen a card like this that's like a cheap black creature that just is basically the Abyss or unblockable?
See, but that's the thing is it's not a cheap creature. Like I've seen a lot of people excited for this, but like there's a huge difference between your 1-drops that can't attack on turn 2 and your 1-drops that can. It's like, I just don't really see this as a 1-drop. It's just like a 2-drop that you kind of have to play on turn 1 for it to get to act as a 2-drop. Number 1. Number 2, it's an awful top deck. And number 3, even if you just take away the bottom part of that, of the text and just say it's unblockable. Fine. It's a 1-mana 2/1 unblockable that you don't get to attack with for a couple turns. I just think, the stat line of 2/1 we've talked about many times is why I hate it so much. And it's just not a 1-drop. It's a 2-drop that you have to play on turn 1. And that's almost a downside as opposed to an upside in my mind. So I really don't like the card very much. Maybe it's decent in retail, but I see it. It's an unblockable threat. Nice. But it's an unblockable threat. You have to get down on turn 1 for it to act as a 2-drop. And even then it's still just a 2/1. I really don't like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate for actually playing this, but I mean, it'll be annoying at times, but it's not. I don't think any of us are trying to say it's like an excellent card or anything like that.
Yeah, no, more just a nifty design.
Yeah, it's cool.
Moves us into red. Daneelius, did you want to touch on this first one? You've got a slightly higher grade than me. It's not a card I'm excited about. God, the art is atrocious. Like just Vaughn here from FF12.
The text is illegible too. That's the thing. Like, there's so much white on these arts that it is so hard to read the white text.
Yeah. You pointed out to me that this got downshifted to uncommon, so I'll let you chat about it.
Yeah, it's Captain Lannery Storm was what it is. I don't care about the FCA name, but this is from the bonus sheet. They did downshift it to uncommon. It's tuna red for a haste 2/2. When it attacks, you get to make a treasure token, and whenever you sack a treasure token, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Largely, this is here to me because red's 3-drops in my mind are quite bad. We are getting a really insane 3-drop in this set that is way better than this. My issue with this card these days in Peasant is that the vast majority of the time when I'm going to play this on 3, my opponent's going to have a 2-drop in play that can block it. And so how often is this going to be able to trade with that 2-drop, leaving a treasure behind? Sometimes, a decent amount of time maybe, but even then we actually have in LCI, we had a common 3-mana 2/2 that just makes a treasure on ETB. This is better than that. Like, most likely in most circumstances it's gonna be better than that, but I don't know that it's gonna be that much better. So for me, I might end up just trying this just because of how bad red's 3s are. I don't expect it to perform particularly well. I think largely Magic has just outscaled this effect over time,
which makes the downshift in rarity feel appropriate.
Yeah, it might be a little too late. I felt like this could have been downshifted in rarity a few sets ago if they really wanted to, and it might have been okay. The only thing that's got me here is this is a way to reliably make artifacts if you can attack with it. Like, obviously that is unreliable because of the stat line on this card, but there is a ceiling here that's pretty cool, and I think there's environments where this can be potentially powerful. But yeah, we've definitely passed by when this was actually like a constructed level card.
Yeah, this card was never even that good to begin with, like 10 years ago when it came out in Ixalan. Like, I remember you would open it in limited, you would play it, but like, was this also, am I imagining this, wasn't this also on the March of the Machine bonus?
Yes,
as a rare, yeah.
And the reason why I'm interested in it is actually because it performed reasonably well in March of the Machine. So it's like, but it didn't perform like a rare. It performed like, a solid common or uncommon.
Next up, I have this maybe as the front runner for the best card for Peasant Cube from the set. Maybe I'm misremembering some other cards or not, but Fire Magic is a tiered red spell. It costs a single red mana, and you can pay the kicker cost of 0, so just pay red to deal 1 damage to each creature, or you can upgrade it to Fire Raw by paying 2 mana, so 3 mana total to deal 2 damage to each creature, or upgrade it for 5 mana, pay 6 mana to deal 3 damage to each creature. And once again, like, if you just focus on 6 mana to deal 3 damage to each creature, that's so much, that's unplayable. Like, that's not the way to think about this. The way to think about this is 3 mana, instant speed, deal 2 to each creature, or scale that down for a single red mana, deal 1 damage to each creature. And we just mentioned with Poison the Well, like, -1/-1 shrivel effects are very effective in Peasant Cube. So I see this as like an immediate replacement for whatever that Fuel the Fire, Fuel the Flames card was from Ether Drift that people just aren't excited about. I really like the idea of 3 mana instant speed Pyroclasm that you can scale down to just 1 mana, deal 1 to everything. And then if it matters, if you get to a point in the game where dealing 3 to everything matters and you have this spell, or if you care about, the amount of mana you're spending on spells for some of the blue-red Izzet cards in this set, then yeah, the Fire God option is extra. It's just there. You get to do it with, some amount of the time. So it's not nothing text, but baseline, mini sweeper, 3 mana instant speed, I think is solid. And then the 0 mana fire mode, I think, will come up pretty frequently as well. So I like this quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this card too. I'm not as high on it as you are, because you've got it as one of the best cards in the set, and I think it's just a good card that will probably, if I see it, I'm probably playing it in a lot of my red decks. Obviously, if you're super aggressive, it's not nearly as exciting because it's kind of the card that's good against those decks. But one thing I think this obviously plays into the sort of Grixis control space, but one other place that I could see this showing up is in the Gruul space, because sometimes what happens with your Gruul deck is, even though there's a decent amount of trample, you sometimes find it easy, your opponent can like chump block, a couple of times with some 1/1 tokens they have laying around and find ways to race you if you're Gruul, because you're not quite as big necessarily as some of the other green decks. And this is a way of like cleaning up those tokens, or even potentially cleaning out your opponent's board. Like, you cash in your mana dorks for like some good 4s and 5s, and then you upscale this to 6 and blow out your opponent's board, but your creatures were 4/4, so they live, and now you get a good attack. So I don't know how often that'll come up. That's just me being speculative, but I could see some play there as well, which would lead me to believe the only deck I'm really just never wanting this in is like Boros, even if I'm not super excited to play it in black-red, depending on but maybe it's a way of like clearing out my board so that I can trigger with Blood Artist a bunch of times at the end of the game. So it could be like kind of a combo piece, kind of like how you would sack your whole board with an enabler if you had that. So I definitely see some play on this. I like it a lot. I think it has a lot of roll compression and flexibility. These, like you said, these deal 1s to everything are really good. And this also has the modality of upscaling to potentially be an actual instant speed Wrath, which is obviously a ceiling you're not going to hit super often. But when you do, it's going to feel incredible, I bet.
Yeah, and this comes with the caveat that in the Jank Diver Cube, we're not playing Fear Fire foes, which is almost certainly better than this. So that's why I say this card is such an important pickup from the set for us specifically, is because it kind of fits in between the power level of the weaker Pyroclasm type effects that we play currently and the really busted ones like Rao and the Implicit Maze and Fear Fire foes. This is like very comfortably fits where I want this effect to be.
Yeah, being both-sided is pretty important too, because we even tried the Neo card. It's the 3 mana seismic wave or whatever. Yeah, it deals 1 to all your opponent's cards, and that was too much as well. The being multi-sided means that you can't quite as frequently just like, all right, one-sided Wrath you, kill you. You have to actually play around it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to be playing with those one-sided effects, I could see being interested in this. I do play with those effects, and I think those are all significantly better than this. I've tried, I tried Fuel the Flames, and I've tried a couple of other kind of where the effect hits both sides, and I've just never been impressed with them when unless you can get some other oomph out of it, of like dealing extra damage to your opponent's stuff, even if you're dealing some damage to your own stuff. I think that ultimately red specifically, at least in my environment, is probably the place where this hurts the most, because it's most often going to want to be playing with the kinds of creatures that this hits. And I heard you mentioned, Tim, that, so that kind of relegates this to the Grixis space, but even Grixis in my environment, like blue-red is often playing TPI or, Third Path Iconoclast or Saheeli, and black-red is often playing lots of cheap dorks that it wants to leverage for value in some way. So I've just not found spaces where these symmetrical is the word I was looking for, where these symmetrical effects really play very well. But again, I also have access. I'm willing to play stuff like Realm the Implicit Maze and Purifier Foes. So if you're not, and you want to empower red with an effect like this, I would still argue that something like Magic Missile is going to often perform better than this will. I'm just not very high on these symmetrical effects at this point, having seen them a number of times. That being said, this is almost certainly the best one that we've seen, and so you can't ignore it just because of that. But I'm not very high on the effect overall.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big grade difference. I've got it at B+, you've got it at C-. So that one, I'm just going to maintain that. I think this card is very good, but obviously you have better options that you're willing to play. So I think if we were on Purifier Foes, Route in the Implicit Maze, we wouldn't want a third one, and this one's weaker than those. So
yeah. The peasants threatened to revolt if we didn't cut those cards there.
Exactly. Lightning Bolt downshifted to uncommon here. We all ranked it B+. Is there anything to be said about Lightning Bolt that we could add here that's productive and useful to people?
Yeah, I would say this is a good distinction of the difference between the B range and the A range, right? Because A's should be cards that take over games, and so there is a ceiling to how high a strictly one for one removal spell can go, even if it's one of the best versions of those effects ever printed. The other thing is, this is not something I want to get deep into the discussion here, but you do need to ask yourself if Lightning Bolt is the kind of card you want to add to your environment, because this is a still modern playable card. It's like modern constructed playable level card. It's extremely powerful. And even if it's just efficiency, it's going to win games off the fact that it kills your opponent's 4-drop or 5-drop sometimes. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about if you want this effect in your environment. I think that's a little less relevant now that we've got cards like Galvanic Discharge, which we're not actually on, right? We don't run those. We're on Burst Lightning and Torch the Tower as our 1-mana instant removal. So we have cut back from cards like that do that efficiency at all. We don't run Strangle or anything like that at the moment. So the more of those cards you're running, the more this is just a little better than those, and I think the less egregious it is. But if you're like us and you're specifically trying to curtail your removal just a bit to kind of sculpt like your removal spells to actually play a little different, I don't think we're going to run this, Tim. Am I speaking out of pocket here?
Oh, no, we're not playing Bolt. Okay. But I imagine, Daneelius, you're going to be on Bolt, right?
Yes. Yep, and cool art. No notes, very good card. I don't think that it destroys my environment, because I do already play both Galvanic Discharge and Galvanic Blast, and Blast can sometimes be better than Lightning Bolt. Discharge can't really ever be better, but I think the vast majority of the time you're just pointing your Lightning Bolt at their creature, in which case it's basically just Discharge. So, but yeah, best version of this effect probably now in my environment. B+, great card, excited to play it.
Will you be referring to it as Thrum of the Vestige?
Hell no.
You gotta thrum the bird.
You got to thrum the bird, yeah. Speaking of the bird, maybe talk me off this ledge here. I see Daneelius actually came up on your grade here. Talk me off the ledge that this card is actually just not insane. But Choco Comet, obviously Choco's short for chocolate here. Choco Comet is 2 red for an uncommon sorcery. It deals X damage to any target. You create a 2/2 bird with landfall. That's funny. It doesn't actually say landfall. It has landfall. It gets +1/+0 like all the bird tokens in this set. So the way to contextualize this is it's red for a 2/2 with landfall, get a point of power. And then anything else you can pay into it deals damage to any target. And for whatever reason, I read this card and I'm like, this card's incredible. Starting off as just a 2-mana creature that you could play. It is red. You're not obviously going to run this out, but like you get to just tack on as much damage as you can pay mana for. And I don't want to discount the fact that this attacks as a 3/2 a decent amount of the time as well. So maybe I'm crazy. Like, obviously, like, you're paying 4 mana, you're getting like Foray of Orcs, which is not like an excellent card or anything like that. You're getting something akin to like Twin Shot Sniper, but I think Bleeding Edge, Daneelius, you wrote that out here. That's an actually very good comparison here. That's 1 black to give a creature -2/2 and then make a 2/2 army. This is unfavorable to Bleeding Edge for X = 1, but this also goes up in mana. Like, at some point, you pay red 4, kill your opponent's 4/4, make a 2/2 that attacks as a 3/2 very often, and it can go face. Like, this can be a fireball.
That's the key thing.
I just in real time changed my grade.
A-. Okay, I don't know if I go that.
This might be the best card in the set.
This card looks amazing to me. It is tempered a little bit by being red for the 2-mana creature. You're just not going to run that out very often, but like, just being able to filter all your mana, like a 2-mana 2/2 that had kick or pay as much mana as you want to deal damage to anything. That's a very good card.
You know, when I thought that this didn't go face, I didn't love it. I mean, I still thought it was definitely cubable, but I thought it compared not very favorably with like Foray of Orcs, which is not a card I run, or Bleeding Edge, which is a card I think is very good. But again, there are some black problems for that card. When I realized this can go face, I definitely moved it up. I still have it as a B because, you know, I think that the times where you get to just like top deck this with 8 mana in play and go, oh, I just fireball you out. I don't think that actually happens all that often in Peasant, but the fact that that will happen sometimes, it will come up, you know, once or twice, you know.
It doesn't happen in Peasant because you don't play just straight up fireball, right? Like you would never just put Volcanic Geyser in a cube, but it will go to face if it's attached to.
All right, so let me get this straight. This is functionally a 2-mana 3/2, or it's a Chupacabra, or it kills your opponent. Like it just does all these things.
Yeah. It's
all right. Yeah, this is. I'm gonna go on a ledge here, but I've got this as now I think the only A level card in the set for me. I think I'm going as high as an A- here. I think this is like a straight up bomb.
And we have like touted Atsakin Archer, right? Like a 3-mana 1/4 that pings a creature, like it fights a creature on ETB. Like dealing 1 damage matters to things, and being able to just like red 1 make a 2/2 landfall creature that pings off an opponent's X1.
Right.
Obviously, Daneelius doesn't have any 1 toughness creatures in his cube anymore.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that is the cost. The red is the cost. Like,
yes.
The red just does make this a difficult cast early in the game.
Sure.
It's a way better late game card than those other cards are. And, like, way better. And the fact that, again, that it can go face makes it even better of a late game card than those other cards are. But early in the game, it doesn't compare favorably to other versions of this effect that we have. But as the game keeps going, it gets better and better and better. So like you want this in my mind much more in like a mid-range sort of a deck or even an attrition deck. But in those decks, it's going to be the best card in your deck.
Yeah, I'm ignoring the red cost for now. I'm assuming if I'm going to have a Prophetic Prism and it'll be perfect. I mean, we don't run that card, but I'll find a way to cast this. I'm not worried about that.
My Prophetic Prism Chocolate Comet deck. All right, so you guys are very, very high on the next one. I'm going to let Daneelius read this, and I myself am going to go get some water while you wax poetic about this equipment here.
Yeah, the red bangers will continue until morale improves.
Exactly. Yeah, Red got a lot of tools in this set. I think that this is my pick for best card in the set. Is the Samurai's Katana, 2 and a red for an artifact equipment. It has Job Select, which we've seen before, and it says equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Trample and Haste, and is a Samurai in addition to its other types, and it has Equip for 5. So the idea here is it's a base without considering anything else. It's a 3-mana 3/3 Trample Haste. How does that compare versus other creatures we've had in red for 2 and a red in the history of Peasant? Well, we have a grand total of 0 2 and a red 3/3 haste creatures in the history of Peasant. There's 1 3/3 or better 2 and a red trample creature in the history of Peasant. That's the 4/3 from maybe Mom. I can't remember. But there's the 2 and a red 4/3 with trample. That has players can't gain life. So that is, the one trample version of this effect that we've had before this. But this gets both. It's both the haste and the trample when we've only ever had one creature in the history of the game that has either one of those effects for this mana cost and power and toughness. So just with that, it's insane.
Yeah, this card's great. Yeah.
Did you guys talk about how important the Samurai text is?
Yes, very important.
Daneelius, the 2 that stick out to me as like the premier sort of big haste threats at Peasant up until this point have been On-Crop Crasher and then Begarden Dragonheart. And I think this is like better than either of those cards by a probably not insignificant margin.
But the fact that, again, that's just talking about the creature. And then they trade off with the creature because it is just, it's a 3/3. So at some point, I'm sure it'll get traded off. And then you have this equipment here. And yes, it costs 5 to equip. That's unfortunate.
So
how many times do you need? Right, exactly. No, that's huge. And how many times do you need to equip a +2/+2 trample haste to your creatures to just win the game? Like you're only paying the 5 mana to then put it on something and winning the game with it. So I think this card is outrageous. If this was just a creature, it would be insane. It would be an autoplay in my environment if it was just a creature. This is 2 objects. It's an artifact. It has all the same things that the other Job Select cards have, and the equipment itself actually wins the game at some point. So I think this card is insane, and it's my favorite for best card in the set.
This is either the best or second best card in the set, and honestly, I think you could tell me that it's this or the card above it that we just talked about, but I think they are both just utterly unreasonable. I think this is the kind of card that could anchor, if you're trying to make the equipment synergies work, actually getting that deck over the hump. Because this is just like, obviously you're not going to get that unless you pick it super early, because this card's going to go in any red deck and be the best card in your deck, or one of them. But like, this is the kind of rate when we're talking about, like, one of the problems with equipment historically is that even with these job select type equipment, these 4 Mirrodin cards, the actual effect of the equipment's not very good. Most of the payment that you're giving is for the creature. But like, this is just actually just on rate, and the equipment is awesome on top of that. They put all the stats into the equipment.
Just made me realize too, recommission 1 in a white, that gets back artifacts.
Oh yeah.
Some of these job equipment, job select things are creatures that you can get back with recommission specifically.
Yeah, I don't really have enough good things to say about this card. This card's awesome.
I mean, mainline cube playable. You can Stoneforge Mystic into this on turn 3.
This might be mainline cube playable. I mean, I don't actually know. We'd have to talk about it, but 3/3 haste is reasonable enough, and like, you've got the Stoneforge synergies. There's some other. I mean, like, Red's kind of interested in this. I don't know. We'd have to see.
I came in hot on B, and you guys both went B+, so even higher. I don't put as much faith in the equip cost here, but Daneelius is right. If you do equip it, like, you just spend your turn slapping this on a 2/2 or something, you have a real threat in play.
All right. Best thing about this card is obviously the fact, too, that on turn 6, when you draw your Heartfire Hero, you get to immediately ship in for 4 damage, and your Heartfire Hero isn't a dead card.
Well, see, what I like is that if the equip 5 is a lot, but if you've played your Airmare already, that means you have 5 mana lying around. So the turn after you play your Airmare, you can just give it +2/+2 and trample. So
yeah, let's go.
That way your Aomer can actually be the biggest creature on board.
Exactly.
Yeah, needs that.
Or on 10 mana, you haste up that bad boy.
There you go. Yeah.
Teld, did you want to take this next one? I think this was a U edition.
Okay, this is a me card. All right, so last red card is Coral Sword. It's a single red mana for an artifact equipment with flash, and when this creature enters, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains first strike until end of turn, and it gets +1/+0 and has to equip 1. Obviously, slightly less exciting than a 3/3 haste with a gigantic piece of equipment laying around, but I'm admittedly a sucker for these style of effects, these like little tricky...
Sticks, fork, and electric socket again. That's Yep.
Yeah, in the show notes, I had that I'm sticking my fork in the electric socket again, because these are just the kind of bad... These are the, I know it's bad, but like it's really cool, so I want to make this work cards for me. You know, I like the idea of just like, gotcha in combat. You know, you thought this block was a trade, and instead I'm just eating your creature. I'm gonna find something to do with this Coral Sword later. Probably sticking it on a mouse of some sort. But, you know, I like these style of effects. I don't think they're very good. I think this is the best version of these effects, so I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, best version of an effect that's not very good, and maybe it's better. I think it could be really good in retail, and that might get me to want to try it, because it's just a better military discipline. It's better. Yeah, it's just the best version of this effect we gotten, and it costs 1 mana, and its equip is 1. So like the floor here is so reasonable to manage. That being said, it's like pretty low impact.
Yeah, I've got it in the D range. I'm not high on it, but I do get the appeal. They do it's like poo-poo, the alien thing. They keep kind of hitting this every few sets or so with the equipment that wins combat and leaves behind bad equipment thing. This one costs 1 mana though, so who knows. Let's move into green. Gotta preface this by saying I'm absolutely in love with this first card, whether it's like a C or unplayable. Who knows? I really have trouble with these summons, but first green card is Summon Fenrir. It's 2 and a green for a 3/2 summon, Saga Wolf. Chapter 1. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So a 3 mana 3/2 with a rampant growth effect on it. Chapter 2. When you next cast a creature spell this turn, it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. And then Chapter 3. Draw a card if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. So I'm having a really hard time trying to figure out how good this card is. My gut tells me that it's very good, but that's kind of predicated on you being able to do something with the body or the enchantment before it just dies 2 turns after playing it. Because the totality of the effect here is 3 mana for a creature that can either block for a couple turns or gets an attack in, plus a basic land, plus hopefully a +1/+1 counter, plus hopefully draw a card, though Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 are not guaranteed, right? Notably, it can count its own power in Chapter 3 if it just happens that 3 power is the highest power on board. The real key, I think, here is getting the +1/+1 counter after Chapter 2, which really shouldn't be that hard. Just play this on turn 3, play a 4-drop on turn 4, boom, you got a +1/+1 counter on top of your land. But, I mean, it has the same big summon question mark that we're going to bring up for every summon, which is like, it dies. It kills itself X number of turns later. So, like, how good is it actually? And my answer to that is I actually don't know, but I'm, intrigued enough by the total effects here and the possibility of just trading this off for something and the way it works with Delirium that I'm going to go, like, high C, but I don't think it quite breaches B. Revisit this in, like, a month, and maybe it's, like, a B+ card or something like that.
Yeah, I think this card is okay, but I'm going to preface that I also think it's worse than Satina, most likely, which is a card we're currently on. The thing with green creatures is that three power is about the most that most cheap cards get in non-green colors. Obviously there are bigger creatures, but like 3 does put a pretty solid floor on potentially getting to draw a card if your opponent doesn't want to kill this. I assume most of the time if we're playing this on curve or early into the game that we're going to get a +1 counter on our creature. It's not often that in your green deck that you're not going to have a creature to follow up your ramp spell. And then that creature, if it doesn't die, will almost certainly be the biggest creature on the board. And if your opponent's removing it, they probably don't have time to play a creature that's bigger than 3 power. These are a lot of assumptions, I think, but I think this probably gets the full package reasonably often in Cube if it sits around and does the thing, which is pretty decent. But at the end of the day, we ramped, we cycled, we got a creature bigger, and we either gained some life or dealt like 3 damage. I assume most of the time you're defending with this too. So like if we're blocking with it, if we assume it gains like 5-6 life or eats a removal spell, those are like all things considered pretty decent.
If it ever trades for a card, whether that's in combat or a removal spell, I think it's excellent.
Yeah,
right.
The issue with the cards, it's hard to evaluate because there's just so many different play patterns with this. So one is you play this on 3, you get your land, it trades off, you're happy, you're very happy with that. Another is one you described where you play this on 3, you follow it up with the counter on 4, you draw the card on 5, and this goes away. I think you're happy with that as well. But here's a couple that happen that I think you're extremely unhappy with, where you play this on 3, you get a counter for a creature on 4, you go, before you untap on 5, they kill that 4-drop you just played, you don't draw the card, this goes away, and all it was a 3-mana rampant growth that like gained you a little life. That will happen. Like that is part of the play pattern here, and part of the issue is like you're giving your opponent play. You're saying like, hey, if you're a really good player, you can try to figure out ways to mess up this chain, and now I just have the 3-mana rampant growth, gain a few life, whatever. Yeah. The other place where I think this is quite bad is off the top, like if in a situation where you need the creature to stick when you're top decking or whatever, and this won't stick, and maybe you don't get either Chapter 2 or Chapter 3. So I just think the variability here is so wide, it's really difficult for me to grok what the average case is. My guess is the average case is good enough, and so I'm going to run it, but I could see going either way in a month. Like you said, I think it could be a B, it could be a D.
Yeah.
Yep, good place to wrap that one up. Though I will, just to refute a small point there, I don't think you're that unhappy. Obviously, you want to draw a card on Chapter 3, but you're not that unhappy if your opponent points a removal spell at a creature that was just about to sack itself anyway.
No. I mean, they point the removal spell at the creature you get the counter to, and now you don't have the largest creature in play.
Are they actually going to have time or enough mana to play a creature bigger than 3 power?
Maybe not. Yeah.
This is a revisit. We'll have to revisit this one for sure because you're right. It's either amazing or it's probably pretty bad. Who knows? Next one, probably bad more often than not. Saz's Chocobo is a green mana for a 0/1 uncommon bird with landfall. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. And notably, it does not have flying. It is not a flying bird. It is just a bird. So we're talking just an aggressive 1-drop that gets bigger when you hit lands. And I'm not going to ignore the 1-drop. That can become like a 5/5 or 6/6 over time. But obviously, you don't play this thing on turn 1. It's pretty atrocious.
And I'll say that I was the one that added this. I think for my environment, theoretically, it's a card that's going to be way better because I'm more trying to lean into green aggro. But I actually have come down a lot on this effect, both for retail and for Cube, specifically because it didn't really click with me that especially when you're on the draw, this doesn't get to attack on turn 2 very often. On the draw, it's going to be a 1/2, and okay, so now you're having to wait multiple turns for this card to do anything. If you have access to multiple MH3 fetch lands, this gets better. But I think that simple fact of the fact, like, it's not an evolving adaptive. It's not one of those creatures that gets to attack on turn 2 as a 2/2 the majority of the time. This rarely will get to attack on turn 2, especially on the draw. That knocks it down pretty significantly for me. So I've come down on this. I don't anticipate testing it.
Yeah, very cute, but I don't think it's good.
Yeah, notably the bird creature type does matter for retail, but doesn't matter outside of that context. Quina, Jesus Christ, I absolutely hate this character. Quina Q Gourmet. Gourmet.
Gourmet is the word, but it does
Legendary
look like,
creature Q.
Q, yeah, it's the only Q in Magic. All right, whatever. Quina sucks. This character sucks. It's the comic relief character from FF9, and his whole shtick is that he likes food. Like,
and they made the card pretty good.
They'll be like, the world will be collapsing. He's like, me hungry, me eat frog, and it's like, shut up. Quina is 2 and a green for a 2/3 uncommon Q. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, you make that many plus a green frog creature token, a 1/1 green frog creature token, and then you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice a frog, put a +1 counter on Quina. So Peregrine Took, that makes 1/1 frogs instead of food, but the sacrifice trigger is a good deal worse. It lets you just stack up counters on Quina instead of drawing cards. So my assumption is making 1/1s is usually better than making food. Not in all cases, but the sacrifice triggers worse. So I think this all kind of like evens out to like this card is probably like exactly as good as Peregrine Took, unless you care specifically about food artifacts versus +1 counters or tokens or whatever.
Yeah, I think this is another case of like in a vacuum, this card's probably a little stronger because the frogs actually contribute to the board, and you can, I mean, like you said, the sack's worse, but we can still do stuff with it. I can't help but like despise looking at this card too, though. So there is that.
It's true.
I also assume, but I don't know what cards would do this, but I assume there's an infinite combo here. This just reads like a card that is like oops, an infinite combo.
Chatterfang stuff, right? With Pitiless Plunderer and a sack outlet like that.
Sure, there you go.
I think from like in a vacuum evaluation perspective, I agree that this is probably almost exactly the same as Peregrine Took, but actually in the draft perspective or in game perspective, it plays out pretty differently. And I'm interested in pushing green a little bit more into the tokens space because of food and Peregrine Took and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to try running both in the upcoming season and see how that plays and try to bring in a little bit more kind of generic token support just to see how that runs. But they are different cards ultimately. And so if you're really trying to push the food angle and you only want to play one of these two, then you definitely should be playing Took. But if you just care about generic tokens instead, then this is almost certainly better.
Yeah, which our green-white deck could use a little bit of support.
All right, yeah. I mean, if you're playing Peregrine Took, like, just, I don't know, flip a coin or whatever. If you have food synergies at all, just keep Peregrine Took. It's just better with the food stuff. Torgal, a fine hound is the name of the next card. Teld, this is a Final Fantasy... No, this is 16. 16. I don't know anything about 16. All right.
Yeah, I don't either. This is a mana dork. It's a 1 in a green for a 2/2. Taps for any color of mana. And whenever you cast your first human creature spell each turn, that creature enters an additional +1 counter on it for each dog and or wolf you control. It's pretty meaningful upside. Like 2 mana dorks. Most of the upside on these cards is relatively minor. I mean, there's some that are okay. But this is pretty substantial, I think. You've got a lot of humans that you're going to be able to cast in most cube environments, and giving them free stats is always nice. Oh, if you cast Unleash the Hounds, this card's cracked, right?
Well, that too, yeah. I like this card a lot, though. Actually, this is the first 2 mana. This is the first bear that taps for any color of mana in the history of Peasant.
Is it really?
And it is. Like, so Servant of the Conduit was one that could do it, but that's capped by the amount of energy that you have. We have like Paradise Druid, but that's a 2/1. So just in terms of a bear that taps for any color mana, this is the first one. And that, again, already on its own to me would make me interested. I think that it's not going to be that hard to get a counter out of this, and then that makes it even better. So I like this a lot, and I definitely would be running it kind of regardless of human synergies, and the more human synergies you have, the better it gets.
Yeah, I'm not even concerned about human synergies. I was just meaning that most of your peasant cubes or most
will
cubes
have humans
in general will have some number of humans. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah, I actually think this is probably even better than some of the like rare ones we play in our mainline cube, because you will just get a +1 counter out of this incidentally sometimes, and you kind of don't get the bonuses from a lot of those other cards very often. I would not care about this if it didn't have the potential to get +1/+1 counters. I don't think 2 mana 2/2 tap for any color is something I care about that much, but I feel like the 2 mana dorks at Peasant could use a boost these days. We're still on like recursive or reclusive, whatever, taxidermist and Paradise Druid. Like we're on like 5+ year 2 mana dorks. I like the direction of like, you know, give me like Biophagus type cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, also legendary creature for whatever that matters. You know if it matters to you.
Yeah. Teld, speaking of legendary creature, what do we have next?
Yeah, so we have Diamond Weapon. This is 7 green for an 8/8. Is this a Final Fantasy 7 card?
Yeah, again with the giant super boss nonsense creatures being like random uncommons. It's just like weird to me.
So it's a legendary artifact creature elemental, and it costs 1 less for each permanent card in your graveyard. It has reach, and it prevents all combat damage that would be dealt to it. So basically protection from red because it's gigantic and can't take combat damage. Yeah, this card's okay. I think it's these kind of cards that have cost reduction people always love playing with, but I don't necessarily think it's super good, but it's probably fine in some decks. Like you can, Dredger's Inside or Malevolent Rumble and get this down in cost. Daneelius mentioned, though, that this doesn't have any ETB or ward or even in this case an attack trigger. So, like, this is just big dude without trample and also can't cycle to go get me a land and give me 3 life. So I don't know how interested I am.
Smacks around flyers all day long. I mean, it's an artifact. That's really the only, like, plus here. I mean, big, giant, dumb creature with no trample or anything just isn't a recipe for a very playable peasant card, even if you can play it really cheap. But I like the card. It's just not... I don't think it's actually as powerful as it reads. Even if you get it down to green, it's like some decks are just like, okay, like, no trample? Okay,
yeah,
I'm fine with it.
This is just another reminder of how spoiled we were by Hollow Marauder.
Yeah. I can't imagine there's too much else to add here. If you really want to go, like, it's not even a grave break payoff. Like, it doesn't enable anything, and it's just big vanilla. So, Daneelius, you want to talk about this fatty here?
I love the name. I know none of the flavor, and I don't care. The name is
there's
awesome,
no flavor. It's just a fat chocobo.
Okay. So, summon Fat Chocobo. First use of the word fat, I think, in Magic's history, so that's cool. This is 4 and a green for a 4/4 enchantment creature saga bird. Chapter 1, you create a 2/2 green bird creature token that has that landfall ability of when you play a land, it gets +1/+0. So ETB, essentially, it's a 4/4 and a 2/2 with landfall. And then it has 3 additional chapters, and each chapter is creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. So you play this, it's a 4/4 and a 2/2 that can grow. And then for 3 more turns after that, all of your creatures get trample. Now, all of your creatures getting trample is a very meaningful line of text there. Now, it doesn't happen on the turn it comes down, which is a little bit awkward. Additionally, oftentimes you really want your expensive green creatures to be really good stabilizers. And the fact that now you're relying on this creature that kills itself after a few turns to stabilize you, that's a little bit awkward. So I do think both because of the trample text and because of the fact that this goes away, you definitely want this much more in your assertive green decks than you do in your more, slow controlling green decks. But if you're assertive, this card seems actually kind of nuts to me for a common, especially. Like the power level here seems really pushed. As a comp would be something like Crested Herdcaller, which is 5 mana for 2 3/3s with trample, and that's a card that a lot of Peasant cubes still play. It's a card that's kind of always been right on the edge of playability for me. This gives you essentially a 4/4 and a 2/2 that grows with trample, and it gives all your other things trample. But it goes away. And so you do want to be assertive. You want to get the game over with, but this really helps you do that by giving all your other creatures trample. So I like this actually quite a lot. I'm planning on giving it a try in the next season and seeing how it plays.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm at. I like the body positivity here. Big fan of that. Teld, any thoughts on Fat Chocobo?
I'm not really into it. I think it's worse than the other options that maybe not worse than the other options that are direct comparisons, but stuff like oh my god, the Who Did It? What is the name of that card? The 5 mana
a murderer
Killer
between us.
Killer Among Us.
Oh, that's
a Killer Among Us.
Yeah, that's better.
I think a lot of, not as many as we've mentioned this, is not as many as you'd think, but a lot of big green creatures already have trample. I'm struggling to find the green deck outside of maybe Gruul that's super interested in this, because green-white tends to have a lot of small tokens where the trample won't be necessarily relevant, and your other green decks tend to be very grindy. I think there's definitely a space for this. I just don't think it's the kind of card that necessarily fits into what our cube specifically is doing.
Yeah, it feels like a Gruul card for sure. It even has these sagas or summons have enchantment type on them for some of the delirium stuff we play. So I could see this fitting into a deck with Patchwork Plaything, Wicker Folk, stuff like that. So maybe worth a shot. I'm always interested in switching up the 5, so we've got some longtime members there. Daneelius, this little funky monkey here.
Yeah, this is Cactuar, which is 1 green mana for a 3/3 creature plant, uncommon. It has trample, so 1 mana 3/3 trample. But at the beginning of your end step, if this creature didn't enter the battlefield this turn, return it to its owner's hand. So the play pattern is you play this, it gets a turn to attack, and then it comes back. And how good is that? I have no idea. I have no idea at all. I've tried really thinking about how this plays. 1 mana is so little mana, and 3/3 is so big, but it doesn't stick around. So like I have no idea. I need to see this play out in retail. I couldn't tell you. I have no idea on a grade. I don't know if I'm going to play it. I wish I had more insight to offer here, but like 1 mana is very cheap and 3/3 is very big for 1 mana. But man, the downside is rough. Like I was trying to think of ways you could play around with the downside, but other than Whirlwing Stormbrood giving all your things flash, I don't know. I don't know how you're supposed to play around with that effect other than it re-triggers like creature ETB things, but like I don't have a lot of cards that care about that either. Like Rosie doesn't care about non-token, so I just don't know.
Yeah, Neighborhood Guardian doesn't care about it because it has 3 power.
Yeah, I don't know.
Imagine looking at this card and not immediately thinking of the obvious synergy with Insidious Roots, because this is a plant. It gets bigger when cards leave your graveyard. I don't know what's going on here. Obviously, this is flavor forward. Cactuars are these little annoying things that run away from you all the time. So, like, that's the point of the joke here. But who knows? I couldn't tell you. Funny design. Probably does some interesting stuff that you wouldn't really immediately think of. But like, are you supposed to use a cube slot on a card like that? I don't know.
Yeah, my if you just put a gun to my head and tell me what I think, it's probably bad. But like, I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, big question mark there. Maybe the listener can tell us what they think of that. So the actual last green card was Nature's Claim, which I think we can just kind of like peg that as like here's a pretty good naturalize effect if you're interested in like highly competitive, like cheap compartmentalized naturalize effects, but nothing super exciting. I'm sorry, Search for the Frozen Esper is actually the name of the card. But okay, let's touch on some gold cards here. Quite a few gold cards in the set, though again, a lot of them are trying to be like character top-down designs and stuff like that, so they're not necessarily like super cubable. But I know the first one here was something Daneelius was kind of raving about like months ago. It was one of the first cards spoiled from the set, so I promise that when we eventually get to it, you can be the one to kind of grok what's going on here.
Yeah, this is a card I'm probably most excited about for the set, even if I don't think it's the best card. This is Garland, Knight of Cornelia. It's black-red for a 3/2 legendary creature, human knight. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. And then it has for 3 black, red, that's 7 mana. Return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield transformed. Activate only as a sorcery. And on its transform side, it's a 5/5 flyer. And it says whenever it dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library. So card itself, without any other like context for Cube, we're looking at kind of a 2-mana Dragon's Rage Channeler. Channeler has the same text of like whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. This is 2 mana for a 3/2 version of that as opposed to 1 mana 1/1, but obviously Channeler can grow into a 3/3 flyer. So if this wasn't black-red, I'd say that this card compares favorably to Dragon's Rage Channeler, but it is black-red. 2 mana for the 3/2 stat line I've come to really enjoy a lot. In fact, as a side comment, it feels to me like we're getting to this place where 3/2 or 2/3 is kind of the baseline that you have to come to expect for 2 mana cards in Cube. There's just so many. But okay, and the other benefit here of 7 mana to flash this back from your graveyard as a 5/5 flyer definitely does matter. Matters less in Cube than it does in retail. You're not getting up to that 7 mana mark as often in Cube, but in black-red especially when you're trying to play a small game with a lot of removal spells, I can definitely see this happening more often. You can potentially mill this into your graveyard or discard it into your graveyard in a late game and just immediately get that 5/5. The reason why I like, just as a card, I have it as like a C+ in the sense that I basically think every black-red deck is probably going to play this. I don't see this necessarily as a card you're taking as the first black or red card in your pool, but it's going to get played quite often. The reason why I like it so much is that black-red, in fact, at the end of last year when we did our kind of year in review, I mentioned that I was really hoping for some black-red gold cards that pushed it outside of just kind of sacrifice and artifact sacrifice, or removal spells. Like this is basically what black red gets for its gold slots all the time. In my environment, I play a lot of gold cards. I have a big environment anyways. I play a 540 cube, and I play a little bit more gold cards than the average cube does for its size. And I do that for a lot of reasons I don't want to necessarily get into now. But one of the things you have to worry about when you're playing large gold sections is the more that those gold sections kind of point in the exact same direction, the more that your drafts can end up really on rails, where you're the only black-red player. For every black-red card that gets opened, it's going to go in your deck. It's going to be a really good card in your deck, and you don't really have to think about it. And what I really enjoy is when there are these gold cards that push the color pair slightly out of its comfort zone. It's not that you can't play this with other normal black, red, gold cards. It's gonna be fine there. But this at least encourages you to play slightly outside of what black, red is often going to be doing. You can often, maybe you start in like a black green space where you're trying to make use of the graveyard, and then green's kind of drying up, and then you see Garland. It's like, oh, okay, I can maybe do like a black red graveyard strategy slightly. Or you start in a blue red space where you're focusing on non-creature spells. And then again, blue maybe dries up a little bit, and you see this, like, all right, I'll do black, red, non-creature spells. So I really value these effects that are playable on their own, really solid cards on their own, that ask the color pair to do slightly different, or play slightly differently than they would have otherwise. I think it allows for emergent synergy in your cube to just pop up, and for decks to come up that would just never have been drafted otherwise without specifically cards like this in your environment. So I love the card. I still think it's like a C+. It's not incredible or anything, but I think for what it does to the cube, it's a really welcome addition.
Been rehearsing that one for 6 months now or something like that.
Exactly.
He's been waiting to say that. Yeah, I mostly agree with what you're saying though. Like, I think this card is very nifty. I like that it fits inside of red black, I think fine, but it doesn't do the same thing that all the other red black cards do. I like that it helps with a couple of problems. A lot of times, like in our environment, for example, red black, it tends to be a very low curve, cheap deck. And so sometimes you struggle with, flood, or with ways to actually close out the game if your Blood Artist plan doesn't work out as like your plan B for killing them. Your aggro plan's plan A, and then your plan B is to Blood Artist them. This kind of gives you a plan C of like, I'm going to filter my deck really well so that my draws are better throughout the early to mid game when I'm casting my other spells. And then it gives me a big dumb idiot to spend a bunch of mana on, and a 5/5 flyer will kill people occasionally. It fits in a couple of different synergies too, where you, like you said, you could do like a Jund thing or like a Grixis thing where it just kind of incidentally ends up in your graveyard and you're planning on spending 7 mana. In Grixis specifically, it's also probably just like a fine early game play, right? It basically is like Darcy the Blocks, which is fantastic for your defensive Grixis deck. So I really like the design. I'm going to push to include it, I think. I don't necessarily think it's the kind of card that's like statted well enough to be a forever card, but it is very cool, very nifty. And this was the original. I'm glad they did a good job on this one, because this is the OG Final Fantasy boss. This is the first boss in the entire series.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, because you know this, you mentioned it with Chris, I don't remember exactly what it was, but that whole, like, put it on the bottom of its owner's library is, like, alluding to the fact that, like, when he dies, he, like, creates some sort of time loop or something like that. Isn't that what happens with Chaos?
Yeah, the shtick with Garland is he's the first and last boss of the first Final Fantasy. So yeah, you fight him as like a knight, and then after you beat him, he didn't actually die. He got like, I forget, because that game's plot is both shallow and it's a million years old, a million years since I played it. But basically, he ends up becoming Chaos, and I can't remember if he goes back as Garland or if Garland levels up into Chaos. But in any case, it's like creates this like time loop where Chaos, and Garland are the ends of the story essentially, and that's why like he's kind of unstoppable or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything about the card too. I like the design of do a thing, surveil 1. Snarlin, Gorehound, play small creatures, surveil 1. It all adds up over time. Anytime you can do things that you normally would be doing and just get surveils off of them for free, like that really does add up in a game. So I like this. Only question I wanted to ask is, do you think like the existence of Blood Tithe Harvester like hurts this card at all, being like same stats, same cost, like generically playable Rakdos card, or do you think it's like they can just coexist, they're fine?
I don't mind there being some cards that are better than others, and I do think Harvester is better than this, but Harvester is really, really, really good. So that doesn't really bother me. I think this is like a better, as a pivot point in the draft is kind of what I view this card as, where Harvester's not. Harvester's just like, it's just an insane card, And if you're touching black or red and you're early in the draft, you're just going to take that and you're going to be happy. This asks a little bit more of you, but it also encourages you to do something slightly different. So I think that's, it's a welcome addition.
I don't think it's really fair to compare every card to a Pioneer, multi-format playable card that's for constructed.
We all know Blood Tide's better. I'm just asking, like, if you got a super thematic cube like ours and you only have so much flex slots for like generically playable gold cards or whatever, it's like, do you put a second one in, that sort of thing.
I think they're okay to exist in the same space because I don't think they're doing strictly better things. Like, yes, Blood Tithe is a better card, but it's not doing just what Garland does, but better, right? It's doing a different thing than Garland, actually, if we want to talk about it, you use the blood, put Garland in the graveyard. That way, you get to draw a card. Synergies.
All right. Yeah. Teld, I've always pronounced this as Ultimecia, but do you think is it Ultimecia? Ultimecia?
I've always said Ultimecia, but Ultimecia also makes sense. That probably flows off the tongue better. But yeah, I've always called it Ultimecia.
All right, well, quick touch on this card because it's not actually like a huge cubable card. Ultimecia, Time Sorceress, 3 blue-black for a 4/5 legendary human warlock. When it enters or attacks, Surveil 2. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 4 blue, blue, black, black, and exile 8 cards from your graveyard. If you do, you transform it into Ultimecia Omnipotent. Weird name because she dies super easy, but whatever. Menace 7/7. When this creature transforms into Ultimecia Omnipotent, take an extra turn after this one. So I don't think anyone's blown away by the front half here. I don't think it's like the most embarrassing card in the world, but it's obviously just like below the bar when you compare it to something like Mouth of Sauron at the same mana cost. But I did want to mention it because I believe it is the first uncommon extra turn spell ever, like extra turn anything ever. And B, it's another one of those music shouts where the boss music for the final form of Ultimecia is a song called The Extreme, which is another like huge recommendation I would ask people to look up if you're just like really into video game music. So the Extreme is the name of that one. I would check it out. It's really cool.
Also, you had to pay 8 mana, exile 8 cards. You know why? Because it's the final boss of Final Fantasy VIII. Oh!
They did that a lot, actually. There's another one that's like 13 cards in your graveyard. I wonder what game that one's from or whatever. So yeah, we don't have to really talk about the card itself unless you guys care, but I am interested. Do you guys care about the implication of extra turns in Peasant? And like, is that even something you really want? Do you want time warps in Peasant?
Horrified. This is a good horror vibes. Yeah, it's like I don't really want that. I like Peasant not having that effect.
I mean, one way you can think about the extra turn effect here is just that, like, at the beginning or it could be like at the beginning of your turn, if you control 8 lands, then you flip this. It's like it's kind of an extra turn, but because it takes up your entire turn to do it, it's like it's not really an extra turn spell. So I think it's fine. The card is mediocre enough that it doesn't worry me that much.
What do you mean? You got to attack them with your Mischievous Mystic and 3 fairy tokens.
I wanted to double check there, and I missed Peasant All-Star Piece It Together from the Alchemy set that can take an extra turn. So sorry, I was wrong.
There you go.
Daneelius, why don't you go ahead and take Gladiolus here? Okay, can I just say for just a second, I'm sorry, I hate Final Fantasy 15 with a passion, and there is just a moment, I got to get this off my chest. I'm very sorry, I know we're running up on time, but like there's like 3 chapters of the game where this character just fucks off for no reason and then comes back 3 chapters later and never discusses where he went. Like, you just don't have this character for like 15% of the game for some reason. Anyway, nice. What is the card? What's the card?
I know nothing about that. Yeah, so it's Gladiolus Amicitia? I don't know. Gladiolus is a 4 red-green for a 6/6 legendary creature human warrior, uncommon, and it says when Gladiolus enters, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And then it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, another target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. So not a whole lot of comps in Peasant for an expensive creature that is big, that's large, that gives you card advantage ETB, which I do consider the top effect to be, card advantage adjacent at least ETB, while also enabling attacks. So it essentially has like 2 ETBs, while then also giving you this kind of persistent advantage. Now, it's 6 mana. 6 mana is a ton. And if they do just Doomblade it, then, that's the thing though. If they Doomblade it, you got in theoretically a big attack. Like again, imagine your curve of Aomer into this. Like you're pretty happy about that.
No, if they kill this with the trigger on the stack, you just don't get it, right? If they just Doomblade this, you get the land, but you don't get the big attack.
You're right. Yeah, if they kill it with the trigger on the stack, you're right. You don't get the attack. If they just kill it after the trigger, after you get the trigger, then yes, it did a big thing. But so I agree. There's fail cases here for sure. What I like about it is the fact that you can search up any land means that you're going to get your MH3 tap land, your MH3 fetch land, and so theoretically you're set up to, even if you don't have another land in hand, do this again the following turn. And that package all combined of this giving you some good ETB value while also representing, a very quick clock that's going to end the game very quickly if they don't have that Doomblade, means that I think it's a reasonable include. I've been looking for a red, green, gold card that's a bit fatter. I'm currently playing the Dino that when it ETBs deals 1 damage to everything for 5 mana, but I haven't really liked any of the other gold, red, green options that are large. My red, green section is mostly just good, efficient, cheap creatures, which is good, but it does again kind of have the same problem as black, red, where it just pushes the color combination into doing one thing, which is playing 2 and 3 mana, 3 and 4 power creatures and just smashing, and can't really play any other way. So I like this as a potentially opening up options for red, green to play a little bit bigger in my environment. That being said, I don't think it's incredible or anything. I think I give it a C. It's a fine card, but it certainly has some downsides that you got to be aware of.
Yeah, I actually think this card is pretty all right. The searching for any land, have we had unrestricted land searching at Peasant? Because I don't know if we have, because this can go fetch utility lands, which is pretty cool. I mean, we're not currently on any that would be meaningful to go get outside, like, I don't know, maybe Pit of Offerings against certain specific decks. But if you're running cards like the Memorials or, any of those tons and tons of ETB tap value lands, card can definitely do some, can be a little bit of extra value. It sets up good attacks, potentially. It gives you a reason to keep playing lands into the late game. I don't think it's a world beater or anything, but I think this is a rock solid playable card that, honestly, in a cube setting, like in a regular cube setting like this, might just be better than something like Primeval Titan.
Maybe.
That's a take right there. That's
Maybe.
a take. I like it. I like the take. It's scalding.
Could be cool with the Ravnica bounce lands if you have access to those too. Just fetch up a bounce land, get your landfall trigger, bounce a land back to your hand, landfall trigger, so on and so forth. I don't like that the landfall trigger can't target itself. I kind of hate that it can't target itself, but yeah, I'm like not really into it. It's not the Doomblade. It's more the counter spells that make me like very skeptical. It's just cubes don't need more 6-drops necessarily. Lesson we've learned. I do think it is a good 6-drop, but you just don't need more 6-drops. But and if you're looking for more fat and gruel, I have one particularly rotund chocobo that I could recommend that we may or may not have talked about already. But yeah, I like what this card is doing. It's Golos. I mean, it's basically just Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, uncommon. So
yep, exactly.
I would not be embarrassed to take this card in my Gruul deck, though. If it were in a cube, I would play it probably a large percentage of the time.
Agree with the sentiment that we don't need more expensive cards that don't have cheap buyouts. That is certainly the thing.
Give me, to be just slap cycling on everything at this point that costs 6 mana, and I'm like, okay with it. Zidane, Tantalus Thief, is 3 red white for a 3/3 legendary human mutant scout. Why is he a scout? When Zidane enters, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it. It gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. So a little Zealous Conscripts action there with some lifelink. Whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent from you create a treasure token. So once you give back a stolen creature, or if an opponent steals a creature from you, you get a treasure. And that's obviously a joke on like Zidane is a thief. He kidnapped someone. He holds them for ransom. When you give them back, they give you the treasure token. So fun little ransom flavor there. But Boros card that steals a creature, untaps, gets a nice lifelink swing in, and then leaves you with a treasure. The card itself does not have haste, so like the Zealous Conscripts comparison isn't exactly apt. But this card seems pretty decent to me. The lifelink is kind of the thing that sells me on it, not so much the treasure. I do want to note, though, you get the treasure after you give the card back, so you can't do the thing where it's like, I got a treasure, I'm going to use it for my village rights to sack the creature. You can't do that, but where are we at on this? I think this is a pretty cool card. I think for us personally, this is probably the card that should replace Shadowfax as far as like doing a more Boros-y thing than a more cutesy thing. But I kind of like this as a threat and effect attached to a creature. And again, lifelink being a big selling point for me here.
I don't know. Like, I I really. I wish this had haste, even if it meant being like a 2/3 with haste. I think I would, or a 3/2 maybe would be better. But whatever. Like I really just kind of wish this had haste on my 5 mana game ending play. It's a little weird that it's like kind of a mana producing value card, but also kind of wants to be a finisher. It's these are like unclear, like almost contradictory goals that this card's doing. I don't think it's bad, right? I think I'm a little lower on it than you guys seems like are, but I think it's a good card. It just I don't love when these cards have this sort of weird identity of like it's wanting to do one thing, but it's also trying to do the other thing, and it's not really doing either of them as well as I would like.
Well, erase the treasure text off the card. Like, that's here for cutesy flavor reasons. Like, ignore that completely and just evaluate this as 5 mana, 3/3 steal a creature and smack your opponent for a turn with lifelink. Like, the treasure thing isn't, I think, trying to promote any sort of strategy. It's just here because Zidane is a thief and he holds things for ransom.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't think it's clearly better than Infernal Captor at that point, though.
I'm not sure I totally agree with that. Like, one of the reasons why I like this, kind of similar to Garland in a way, is that it is pushing white-red to do something slightly different, I think, than white-red normally does. Like, this is not a very good go-wide card, for instance. Like, you don't really care about this in your go-wide white-red decks. But in a more, like, kind of tempo-oriented white-red deck, this gets a lot more interesting. Now, how often is white-red going to be tempo in your environment? That's, I think, an interesting question. But if you combine the lifelink with the treasure, both of those lines of text are basically saying, like, you're going to play another turn. You almost want to play another turn, because that extra turn you're getting a nice big advantage from in the sense that you got the lifelink hit and you got a little extra mana. So it's like the issue that I have with the card is I just don't know how well it plays into what Boros generally does in my environment. But if you are playing a little bit more like play instant speed stuff, maybe you have Sheltered by Ghost in your white-red deck, or other things that are asking you to play slightly differently than how white-red normally plays, I think this card could be a really cool addition for that. That's the main reason why I'm interested is, again, it kind of pushes white-red outside of its comfort zone to a degree, while still being a perfectly reasonable card in most white-red decks.
Yeah, could also be that I just really like the dream that Shadowfax offers too. That's a and I acknowledge if we run this card, like, obviously this isn't this card's fault that that's the card it would be taking the spot of, but like I really like the stupid stuff that Shadowfax allows you to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if Shadowfax is like we haven't seen a Boros trophy in many moons, so I don't know if the cutesy thing is the right thing to be doing at the time. So
you're right. This is probably better, but not having haste on it I keep looking at not having haste, and I get it. You're supposed to play another turn with the treasure and the lifelink and all that, but it feels like these kind of cards are supposed to be cards that don't create another turn unless you're sacrificing the creature.
Wouldn't haste just be like kind of maybe not egregious as a gold card, but like Infernal Cap, like if you just slapped Infernal Captor haste on that thing, like anytime you slapped haste on creatures that steal creatures, it's just like I'm hitting you for like 8 or 9 out of nowhere. I feel like that would be maybe a little unfair.
Maybe it would be. That's probably fair. Maybe I'm just I see too close to Zealous Conscripts, and I'm like, but it's not Zealous Conscripts, and that card's ancient. So that maybe that's unreasonable on my end. That's totally fair.
All right, another. I think this one we're all a bit higher on. So Judge Magister Gabranth is white black for a 2/2 legendary creature human advisor knight with menace. Whenever another creature or artifact you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So 2/2 menace, 2 colors, good start in line, assuming you can, pay black and white mana, and then just gets bigger on everything. No once per turn cap, triggers on creatures or artifacts. Get 1 counter on this, and you're very pleased, and then anything beyond that, and it's just like, okay, I've got a sick beater on my hands here.
Yeah, this is the kind of card you sneeze and you get synergy for.
The funny thing about this is, like, synergy-wise, this way outperforms Killian Ink Duelist, which is a kind of a pet card of mine because nobody runs it, and I think the card is insane. But I do think on its own, Killian is way better than this. It's, like, not even close. So it's funny just making that comparison that, Killian's a card no one plays, and without synergy, that card is vastly superior. But obviously with synergy, this card can get out of control very quickly. So, I still, for me, it doesn't get up to, like, the B range because it is just it's just a creature. It's just a 2-drop. It just dies to everything. So it's like not everything, I guess, because it will outgrow some red removal quickly. So I think it's a very good card. I want to be clear. I don't anticipate this being one of the better cards in my white black section, but I do plan on testing it.
It's almost combo-esque, the same way you like the Jury or Ravenous Squirrel type cards play out. But I mean, obviously, I wish it had some sort of way to sack things itself, but I get that they didn't want to push it too much. I feel like it's a good starting line, though. 2-mana, 2/2 menace is a good place to start for something that scales up. Cloud of Darkness. This is one of the original Final Fantasy end bosses, isn't it?
I believe it's 3.
Yeah,
that this
I think
is
that's
from.
what I'm seeing down there on the tiny text. Cloud of Darkness, 2 black, green, green for a 3/3 legendary avatar with flying. Just such a weird Golgari card. So 5-mana, 3/3 flyer with a restrictive mana cost. When it enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, which I think is the exact text on CubeCobra Echo, right? The Descend ability.
Yes.
So you're talking CubeCobra Echo for 2 black, green, green with flying versus just 2 black, black. Which, I don't know, the mana cost, I wouldn't say it kills it for me. This is a strong card. It fits what Golgari decks do. It is hard, I think, to compare it to the 4-mana card that's regularly doing the same thing in one color, though.
Yeah, especially since you can't lively dirge or back for seconds this, which you can on the
True.
I guess you can't lively dirge the CubeCobra, right? But you can.
Yeah, you can. You can get
is
back.
It mana value? I can never remember.
Total
is it power
mana
or
value 4. Total mana value 4.
Okay, yeah. I think on monocolor cards, I don't mind a second pip. Like I didn't care on the Choco Meteor, for example, that it had red. Just don't care. I'll find a way to cast it. I do start caring for gold cards because I think this is much more restrictive when you're talking about gold cards, because you're very heavy black deck, for example, that's just kind of playing a few green cards, doesn't really want to put this in their deck because the mana is going to be super awkward and it's hard to splash, that's not necessarily a downside that it being hard to splash, but even inside of Golgari, this pretty heavily incentivizes you to want to be green black, not black green.
One of the funny things about this card is I think it might be a callback by the designers, because there's a great designer search. It's showing my age a little bit in Magic, but I think maybe the first or the second great designer search, somebody submitted a green-black flyer, and it was called out by the designer, like Morrow and the other designers at WotC, as being a color pie break. And then like a year or two later, for a future great designer search, one of the questions that you had to answer to get into the event was that it was basically asking which color pair would you choose to satisfy some set of conditions if the creature had flying and vigilance, and the correct answer was green black, and that ended up causing a bunch of Twitter controversy or whatever, where people are well, didn't you just say that this is a color vibe break 1 year ago? So I do wonder that if giving this green black creature flying is in some way a callback to that. But I mean, for me, it's just the card is obviously insane to me, because CubeCobra is obviously CubeCobra I think is a B in our environment, maybe a B minus, but it's a very good card. This is also a very good card. To me, the question really comes down to what does your gold section look like? Are you willing to run more CubeCobras? Are you trying to cap the number of CubeCobras in your environment? But I have a hard time imagining that this isn't an eminently cubable, very strong card. And it's really just more about turning the knobs in your own environment of how many of these effects do you want, and what does your green-black section look like.
The year is 2027. All peasant cubes are just CubeCobras and way to rebuy CubeCobras.
Exactly.
Are you on CubeCobra Echo over Ravenous CubeCobra, or are you on both? Or
I play both. Right now, yeah. And I don't love it. But
I think a lot of people are still on Ravenous over Echo, and I think that's incorrect. But if you have room for both, I think that's fine. Did you want to go through Colorless City here on a couple colorless cards?
Yeah, we have time. I think. Go for it. So first we have Capital City. This is a land town. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and it has cycling for 2. I don't think this card is worth running, but I've seen a lot of people be excited about it. I think if you really think about the play patterns of these kinds of cards, the fact that in your opener, which is so in your opener, this card is not going to perform particularly well because it's a colorless card where you're most often going to need the colored mana. And then off the top is when this card gets better, because that's when you might need when you might have access to the extra mana to make a mana of any color. That's also when the cycling is at its best. So I don't love the card. However, it is a land with cycling, and that matters to me because I have multiple archetypes that care about drawing cards or looting cards. So it's a card to at least earmark, but I expect it to perform poorly in the retail environment. If it's a banger in the retail environment, I'll consider including it in queue, but I don't think it's amazing.
I think it's going to be pretty bad. I want my land to be a good land when I have to play it as a land, and this is a bad land when I have to play it as a land. The cycling is the buyout. It shouldn't be the primary use of putting a land in, I think. So I just don't, unless Town matters. Town does matter for retail limited. It doesn't matter for Cube at all.
Yeah, when you got forced into playing your conduit pylons, you at least got a little bit of marginal value out of it, whereas this just gives you nothing. And we've seen these give you nothing Manolith, or not Manolith, Shimmer Grotto?
Shimmer Grotto cards or whatever.
Yeah, they were all terrible until they started aggressively slapping, like Scry and Surveil on them.
Yeah. Cycling helps, but it doesn't help it for Cube for me.
Especially because if you're putting this in most of your decks, the reason you put it in your deck is you have a bunch of aggressive splashes, so you're going to be even less likely to want to cycle it, because you're not putting this in your 2-color deck unless you... I mean, I guess in that case, maybe you specifically do care about the cycling, but there are got to be other better ways to do that.
Yep, so next we got Instant Ramen, which is, I got to be honest, I don't like the name or the art, but it is what it is.
Do you want to know the joke? It's a bowl of instant ramen from a Final Fantasy game.
That's a funny joke.
Because didn't that game have like a big instant ramen?
That's Gladiolus. That's that guy from that other card eating that ramen.
Oh, that's what he was doing for the 3 chapters. He was gone. He had to go get ramen.
All right, sorry. I promise I'll stop.
It's a 2 mana for an artifact. Food. It is a common. It has flash, and when this artifact enters, draw a card, and it has the food text of 2 tap sacrifice, gain through life. So things I like about this: number 1, it is an artifact that cantrips. I do run multiple cantripping artifacts in my environment, including Prophetic Prism and Energy Refractor and Candy Trail, which this is a card that compares pretty directly with Candy Trail. Candy Trail gives you that Scry 2 up front and only costs 1 mana, but Candy Trail doesn't draw the card until you sacrifice it. So pretty similar effects. What I like about these cards is that they have some amount of overlap between your food decks or your artifact decks or your draw 2 decks. There's ways that this makes it in as a 23rd playable in multiple different archetypes. And the colorless section in Cube is atrociously bad. And so the bar is just relatively low. So I think this is a fine side grade on other kinds of cards we have. This might be better, it might be worse. I don't have a strong feeling, but worth calling out.
Yeah, no notes. It's no hot soup, but it'll get it done.
Yeah, isn't this just worse than Limbus?
Limbus doesn't have flash, right?
Okay, sure.
And so the idea is like you can run this in like a blue deck that cares about drawing multiple cards turn or whatever, and it's like a blue artifact deck, for instance, where you're playing counter spells. This might be a better version of that in those decks. But again, all these are side grades.
It's instant.
Exactly.
That's the flaw.
Did you read the card? Did you read the card? Jesus.
We will probably run this in the Neo Cube for obvious reasons.
You know what? It fits there with the dockside ramen guy. Dockside,
the dockside chef or whatever. Yeah, that heavy artifact theme. Yeah. This one, Chris and I are probably gonna add.
Close out with the worst card in the set that we're talking about.
All right, last card is Monk's Fist. This is 2 mana for an artifact equipment with Job Select. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and is a monk in addition to its other types. It has Equip 2. We had a long argument about Glimmerlight, a funny argument. It wasn't really an argument, it was more a troll, but we had a long discussion about Glimmerlight in, I think I don't remember when it was, but a few episodes ago. This is very similar to Glimmerlight. I think Glimmerlight's probably better. But again, I do think that it's worth considering these cards purely because the artifacts or the colorless section in Peasant is atrociously bad. And so cycling other options in, seeing how they play is something I would encourage people to do, because my guess is if you're keeping stats on your environment, the colorless cards in your cube are never getting played. So trying out different effects, seeing if they stick is worth it. I'm probably going to try this out for that reason. I don't think it's great. It's just colorless. So
yes, I'm going to read you my show notes and then be done with this. Imagine Glimmerlight. Did it make an enchantment? Did it give you toughness and cost twice as much to equip, and you've got this card?
It's all fair. Very fair.
I don't want to comment on this one. Don't look. I respect Daneelius' opinion. He's here, obviously, but don't let him rope you into putting this in your cube. Please don't put Monk's Fist in your cube. Don't put Field Creeper in your cube in 20.
This is all part of Daneelius' secret plan to lower your win rate in cube, so that he can keep winning more.
Exactly.
It is really funny that so many of the colored job select equipments make 2/1s, and this is just the same card as all those with no additional effect. Like they just made
the additional effect is that it's colorless.
Okay, yeah, sure. But if you're in the colors, you just play the on color ones, right? Like, we didn't even talk about the white one that's like the Ancestral Blade or whatever. But okay, last real card. I'll just mention these real quick. I asked in the end of year, and I asked after Foundations, and I asked after Duskmorn, and I asked after Ether Drift to stop giving us the tap dual lands and give us something interesting in the dual land slot. And what I didn't mean was guild gates. Like, they gave us literal guild gates. They're town types, which only matters for one archetype in the entire set, for what it's worth. But there's a cycle of tap lands that have nothing. Like, and they're named locations in Final Fantasy, like Guado Salam, Far Plain Gateway, or Rabanastre, Royal City, and stuff like that, or Trino, Dark City. Like, there was an opportunity to do something cool here that wasn't just like make guild gates with a different land type, and they didn't do it. I know it would have been worse for gameplay, but I would have liked if these were even just legendary common tap lands or something, because then maybe you unlock some synergies and stuff like that. And obviously that's a cube centric.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, it would have been worse for retail though, right? Like, it would have just made retail much worse to have your tap lands be legendary. But
here's how we fix it. What if they also cycled?
Oh, sure, yeah. Hey. Give them Cyclone 3, make them legendary. There was something cool you could have done if you were going to name these big locations on these cards, but they're just guild gates, and that makes me really sad because this was
what's the mechanic that what's the SCOA mechanic? The one that is it
Grandeur.
Grandeur.
I mean, sure, why not? They put Hideaway on a land. Like, why not put Grandeur on a land too?
But for real, 2024 was the year of really cool peasant lands, and we've gotten nothing in 2025. It's like, what's going on?
They really edged us with the 13 lands in the Horizon.
I thought for sure in Tarkir Dragonstorm we were going to get, and it wouldn't have been that cubable, but I thought for sure we were going to get like tri-lands that come in untapped if you behold a dragon or something like that, and we didn't. They just gave us the stupid tap dual lands in the original tri-lands. Like, there's nothing. So maybe Edge of Eternities, are you going to be the one who finally breaks this cycle for me? Like, you're all about exploration and space, right? You've got to be the one.
No, it's gonna be the Spider Boy set.
Oh God, Arachno Boy.
We're gonna get guild gates. We're gonna get actual guild gates in that set.
All right, so that closes out all of the cards that we did talk about. We actually removed quite a few. We could have gone on for a while, so just let's use a couple minutes here at the end to kind of give some initial thoughts. And Daneelius, you mentioned like maybe bringing up a card or two that wasn't mentioned here that you think could be like a big overperformer down the line. I'll just give my quick thoughts real quick that I think the set is very flavor forward, and I'm going to mention, well, I will go more in depth on this in the mainline episode, but I like the individual pieces. I like the individual cards coming on. I don't think this was like a big like top tier set for Peasant Cube, but I will say red got kind of hooked up with what I consider the three best cards in the set are all red. The Fire Magic, the Chocolate Meteor, and the Samurai Equipment, I think, are the three best cards in my opinion, and all red cards. So red got hooked up, blue not so much. There's some question marks and a lot of object creation if you're into that sort of thing, but I like seeing the Final Fantasy stuff as someone personally who's invested in that sort of thing, but not a slam dunk set in a very slow spoiler season to kind of make it feel a little less exciting than it could have been.
Yeah, I really enjoyed what they did with a lot of these cards. I think they did the series justice, I think, in terms of like the first standard legal Universes Beyond set. I think the power level here they intentionally held back, probably to avoid a one ring situation. I do think this is cool. Like, I think the reprints are good, even if the bonus sheet looks terrible. I think red got most of the best cards in the set. Like, I agree with that completely. But as a fan of the series too, yeah, I agree. Like, I really, really like this set in terms of design. I hope it is a good limited format because it looks like a lot of cool cards. There's a lot of stuff that's just like very flavor forward, very interesting mechanics. I think these summons have the potential to be absolutely terrible or big overperformers, and it's one that's like my big coin toss for the set. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. It looks like a lot of the rares are toned down, so I'm hoping maybe we'll avoid a oops soup format like we've had for the last 3 formats now, of just like bad formats defined by playing just piles of good cards. So hopefully we'll actually have some synergies. We'll see.
Yeah, I have high hopes for the retail environment. I think it's going to rope me back in, hopefully after a couple of disappointments for me lately. But as somebody who doesn't know anything about Final Fantasy, the majority of the cards, I think, do a pretty good job of fitting relatively seamlessly into the generic general Magic world. There's a couple of big outliers there, like Q, whatever the hell it's called. Like I think that's going to be pretty tough for me to play in my cube. I'm not happy about that. I know there's a lot of people who are completely skipping the set for their cubes because they just are kind of tired of Universes Beyond. I understand that, but I do think that the majority of the cards I'm adding don't really seem out of place to me. Like I said, with a few exceptions, I love the summon design. I think it's daring and bold, and I'm very excited to see how they play. And I love Job Select just as a template of card of equipment that comes with the token. So there's a lot of people who are kind of down on the power level of the set. I'll be honest, I haven't looked. I don't care about normal cube. I really just care about the peasant cards. And for me, there's plenty of stuff here to be interested in. Peasant rarity, I easily I'm going to get to like 25, 30 cards from the set that I can try out in my environment. So I think overall it was a pretty big success, with the biggest caveat being the FCA cards looking so awful, so terrible. Generally speaking, like half of them just are eyesores to look at and experience. So I think that was a pretty big miss, but the design of the cards I quite enjoy.
Atrocious bonus sheet, but I'll rant more about that in the mainline episode because we're not going to have as many cards to talk about there. But that is going to do it for the Final Fantasy review that I know everybody has been looking forward to. Reminder, you can check out the Jank Diver Gaming socials on twitter.com/JankDiverGaming, where I try to spend less and less time these days. YouTube.com/JankDiverGaming, which hopefully I'll be adding more to in the coming months. Stay tuned for that. Join the Jank Diver Gaming Discord. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, there will be a link. And then, of course, you can find Daneelius' Peasant All-Star Cube on CubeCobra, which will also be linked in the description. And you can find him chatting it up in the limited level up server or in the Jank Diver Gaming Discord. So yeah, come hang out, come tell us what you think works for Peasant. By the time you're listening to this, you'll have already listened to the mainline review as well. So give us your thoughts, let us know what we're underrated, overrated, and what the big miss of the set is. We were talking beforehand that there seems to be always one card that eludes us completely that we never talk about. So we'll see what that is for Final Fantasy. But that's going to go ahead and do it. Thank you all for joining. Long episode, but lots and lots of cards to talk about for Peasant and Teld. Daneelius, obviously, thank you all for being here as well. And to the listener, we'll catch you all next time.
All right, folks. Our first standard legal Universes Beyond set is Final Fantasy. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really know that much about it. So I'm looking for you guys to fill me in on what kind of cards we can make for this set. Anyone here know anything about Final Fantasy? Oh, yeah. That's the one with Sephiroth, right? Yeah, and Cloud too, right? Yeah, I think I know those guys. Platinum-haired guy with a long sword, spiky-haired dude with a big sword. Yeah, we'll definitely get a card in there for Cloud and Sephiroth. What else do we have, folks? Hey, do you know anything else about Final Fantasy? No, man, I don't. I've only ever played 7. I thought you knew more. Dude, I don't know shit about Final Fantasy. Wait a second. You all are telling me that the only thing you know about the Final Fantasy universe is Cloud and Sephiroth. Come on, people. There are like 15 whole games in this franchise. You have to know something else about it. Actually, sir, there's 16 games. There's a Final Fantasy 16? When the hell did that happen? Okay, 16 games, and you all are so hyper-focused on the one that came out in the 1990s? Yeah, Cloud's so cool, man. All right. So, Cloud and Sephiroth, Final Fantasy VII, right? Okay. What else can you tell me about just Final Fantasy VII? So let me get this straight. You guys don't even know anything about the game that those characters come from. You just know about them. That's it. Cloud and Sephiroth. Wait a second. What about Cloud of Darkness? Cloud of Darkness? What is that, like when Cloud goes evil in Final Fantasy VII or something? No, Cloud of Darkness is a boss from a different game. Okay, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, Cloud of Darkness next to Cloud Strife in the same set. Won't be confusing at all. Anything else, people? Come on, work with me here. How about Sephiroth? What are you talking about? We've been talking about Sephiroth for like an hour now. Where have you been? Oh, sorry, Chief. I got confused. Oh, my Jesus Christ. Okay, hold on. Wait a second. What about the weapons? The big-ass swords that those characters carry, those are iconic, right? Surely they have names. What are the names for the swords? Oh, I think it's Cloud Sword and the Sephiroth Sword. Are you pulling my leg here? That's not really what they're called, right? No. I think he's right. I think it's the Cloud Sword and the Sephiroth Sword. This has to be a joke, right? Okay, I'm losing it here, guys. Okay, look at this. Look at this right here. We have the official poster for Final Fantasy VII right here. There's Cloud. There's the Cloud Sword or whatever, and he's looking up at this huge industrial building. Surely that building or company has a name. Anybody, please tell me you know what it's called. We've got a deadline here, and we're not making any progress, people. Oh, I remember. Yeah, they're like the big bad guys in the game. They're like bad for the environment or something. That's great. Yes, that's good. Do you remember what they're called? Yeah, I think they're called Cloud Town. Cloud Town? No, please, come on, man. I haven't played these games, and I guarantee you it's not called Cloud Town. No. It's coming. It's kind of coming back to me. I think it's actually called Cloud Town. Why would it be called Cloud? Why would they name the main character Cloud and then call the evil corporation he's fighting against Cloud Town? Well, they used to be at war with Sephiroth City. No. There's no Sephiroth City. There's no Cloud Town. There's no Sephiroth City. This is ridiculous. Okay, look, I'm calling this a wash for today. I need each and every one of you to go home and research Final Fantasy tonight and bring back some good ideas so we can get this set started. Look, let's switch over to the bonus sheet. As you all know, the Through the Ages bonus sheet will be reimagining some of Magic's best legendary cards as characters and events from Final Fantasy. We've already got the cards picked out. We just need to match them to characters. I've got Najila the Blade Blossom as the first card on the list. Does anyone have any suggestions for Final Fantasy characters to reskin as Najila the Blade Blossom? Oh, I've got a great idea, boss. No, please don't do it. Please don't. No, boss, really, pick me. I've got a great idea. No, just, come on, man, don't do it. Hey, boss, Najila, right? I'm right here. Tag me in, coach. I've got it. What? Just please, what? What if Najila was Cloud Strife? Oh, my God. You know what? You're all fired.